welcome to this week's edition of the Casual Shooters Podcast, your premier podcast for the casual shooter. Happy New Year, everyone. This episode is actually being recorded on New Year's Day. I'm starting off 2024 with a bang. My guest today has spent a lot of time compiling a whole bunch of data concerning classifiers, high hit factors, that type of thing. And not only that, he's the only person that I know of that puts out statistics regarding USPSA activity by state. And with the state of things today in the USPSA, this gives us a better idea of how much the lack of activity fees may affect the organization. So, without any further ado, join me in welcoming to the show Mr. Kirt McKenna. How you doing, Kirt?
Good. How are you?
Good. Sorry about that. Normally, I do the old applause thing to bring people in, but uh, being that it's a Monday and a new year, I guess I messed that one up.
It's all right.
If you would take a moment and introduce yourself.
Well, hello. My name is Kirt McKenna. So I run the competition shooting analytics Instagram page, and yeah, I'm here to speak with Dave, speak with y'all, and hopefully we can go over some interesting topics.
Yeah, this is who knows where this conversation is going to go, but this should be a good one. I love statistics, so and I don't know everything about statistics, so I just enjoy them. I enjoy analyzing them, so this will be a good one. So, Kirt, what I normally do is I open up the show with the hardest questions of all. They're
Okay.
icebreaker questions, kind of get to know the guest. So we're going to start there.
Yeah,
Question
let's go
number
for it.
one: favorite movie?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So once upon a time, I probably would have said Star Wars, or at least the original trilogy. Of course, is still a great trilogy, but yeah, obviously what Disney's done with it lately has kind of soured my opinion, even on the originals, sadly. So
Mm,
that being said, Lord of the Rings, that right there is one of the best trilogies of all times, and just a
okay.
great story.
Yeah, I've had a few people recently talk about that, so I get
Nice.
that. So you're into
Yep.
the sci-fi type of thing.
Yeah, yeah, well written sci-fi, and stuff that has just both good storytelling and fun and exciting ways to tell the story too.
Okay. I've learned, having done this now for 3 years, that reading books is falling by the wayside. I think YouTube has killed books. So, with that being the case, if you read, what is your favorite book? Or if you've read a book, what is your favorite?
So yes, I am in the millennial generation, so reading is hard sometimes, but it's funny. You bracket that with a movie question because probably my favorite book is in fact Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
Yeah, because Tolkien is just an excellent author and the great mythology, great ethos that's explained in the books, and there's a whole lot of depth to it that you don't get in the movies. So
Okay, and that was going to be my follow-up question. Okay, so you obviously the books can go in much greater detail than any
yeah,
movie can, but having read the books and seen the movies, do the movies do the book good justice?
I think so. Yes, I think that obviously there's differences, but I think it does a fantastic justice to the books. And again, relative to today's Hollywood and movie creations, it's the adaptations of books. It's just nothing to compare. So yeah, I believe it makes a good adaptation of the books, but I know there are Lord of the Rings nerds that would disagree with me.
Okay. Well, that I mean, it's always nice to hear when,
Yeah.
like, I read The Hunt for Red October, and I've seen the movie, and I think the
Hmm.
movie did a very good job of correlating the story from the book onto the screen. So it's always nice to hear that.
Yeah. And when I was a bit younger, probably about 10 years ago, I used to read a bunch of like Navy SEALs memoirs, um, and books of that nature, kind of like real biographies, stories told from the people, and I used found that fascinating. I just haven't read very many of those type of books recently, but I've always found like those books have been very insightful into both our military and just good people in general.
Okay. Now it sounds like with you being into science fiction, you might be into superheroes. If so, who's your favorite superhero? If not, who's your favorite historical figure?
So I am not into superheroes,
Okay,
and
I'm not
or
either. So
DC or anything like that. Yeah, you would think I'd go with the territory being a nerd and engineer, which I'm sure we'll get into more of my background later. But
yeah,
um, yeah, I'm not interested in superheroes and Marvel and whatever. Just because I've always found them childish, and like the stories are very childish, and like the movies are very repetitive. So just yeah, not something that that I'm not interested in. And like I guess historical figure, I don't know. There's a bunch that I really appreciate and really like, but I don't know if there's any one like historical person that I just think is like the guy. But there's a lot of great people like Teddy Roosevelt. I think as far as presidents go, I think he was a fantastic president. I don't know. I'm sure I could come up with a list of names over history, but
you
um,
you you can't go wrong with the president who
yeah,
created the national park system. So
yeah, exactly.
it's all good. And avid hunter,
Yep.
guy was not afraid to go to another country and do what needed to be done.
Right. Yeah,
So
I loved his foreign policy too. Yeah, we'll
yeah,
we'll go do what we need to do, but we're not gonna be warmongers either. You know.
nope. Yeah,
So.
he was a good president.
Hmm.
All right. So your favorite gun and your favorite caliber. Now this could be a gun that could just be something you've always wanted. It could be something you have in your own collection. It could be whatever, and then obviously the favorite caliber. It doesn't have to be married to the gun.
I mean, I'm a simple man. I would say. I don't have any like historic firearm that is a big favorite. But so I really enjoy my CZ Shadow too. I think it's my favorite gun, or my AR-15 that I've built. I think they're both fantastic firearms, fantastic platforms. And favorite caliber, probably 223 5.56. Just because it's such a versatile round that can be used for so many different things. That Yeah, I just think it's a great caliber. But yeah, as far as like handguns, yeah, like I said, the Shadow 2, man. I just the more I shoot it, the more I'm in love with it. It's just a great gun.
Now you were telling me off air that you live in Colorado. Have you shot at Cameo?
I have not. So
Okay.
I live in Denver, and the last time Cameo was a thing that we could have events at. Kind of during that time, I was more busy personally and didn't afford the time or the money to go over to Cameo because it's a 4 hour drive I think from Denver. So just at the time I wasn't able to go to an event, but I'm aware of Cameo and have seen. Well, obviously the drama, I'm aware of that, but the range itself, I'm vaguely aware that it's actually a really fantastic range. So it's a shame that we can't host matches there anymore.
Yeah, and I was hoping you had been there just so I could
No.
ask you about the range and we can talk about because I hope that at some point the Supreme Court helps all of us out and we can use that range. So that's why I
Yeah.
was asking. So
Right.
hopefully, fingers crossed.
Right. Yeah, I believe the best case right now is out of California to overturn mag bans, but
Right,
and it's stuck in the Ninth Circuit, which that means it could be another 10 years. Who knows?
right,
But yeah,
yeah.
Cameo. From what I've been told and what I've seen, it's a fantastic range, probably the best in the state. But yeah, unfortunately, I just haven't have didn't get the chance to shoot there.
Okay. So, Kurt, did you have you always lived in Colorado?
So I grew up in Colorado, but I did live in Texas for about 3 years down in Houston. When after my undergraduate, I went to work down there, and and then it's a couple years later, a few years later, I decided to go to grad school, and I've been back in Colorado ever since.
All right. So I lived in Houston for 2 years
Hmm.
on the western edge of the 610 loop in Katy, like literally just on the other side of outside of Harris County. Where did you live in Houston?
So I lived in Cyprus, so I guess just north of you. That's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah. You were literally like northeast of me there. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
I was probably
yeah,
there a few days before you were, though. So
yeah. I was
I
there
lived there
from
from 95 to 97.
yeah, yeah. That was a few days before me. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I was there from 2012 to 2016. So
Okay.
yeah,
So what did you get your degree in?
so I got my undergraduate degree in petroleum engineering, and then went to work down in Houston, right? Because that's where
That makes
oil and
perfect
gas
sense.
is
Yeah.
located. Yeah,
Yep.
and then worked there for a few years, and then the market shifted because oil and gas, it's always going up and down, and it just became a good opportunity to go back to grad school. Came back to Colorado, went to Colorado School of Mines for my master's in mechanical engineering.
Hmm.
And then after I graduated from that, when I was looking for jobs again, my old advisor from petroleum engineering called me up and said, "Hey, I've got funds for a PhD. Do you want to do it?" And so I got suckered in with the what if syndrome. Hard to turn down somebody who's like, "Hey, I've got money for you to do a PhD." Um, yeah, so I said yes,
Wow.
and I've been doing that ever since. So about 6 years now, and I'm almost done.
Okay.
Yeah,
So, wow. So you're about to be Dr. Kirt McKenna.
yes, sir.
Very nice.
Yes, sir.
And what is your PhD in, if you don't mind my asking?
So the degree is petroleum engineering again.
Okay.
However, my research, so petroleum engineering, for those of you who aren't aware of the oil and gas industry, is a very multidisciplinary and a very, even though it's a very small industry, it's also very diverse in terms of technical disciplines as well. So my research itself is applying artificial intelligence and specifically artificial neural networks to drilling data in order to use the drilling data, things like weight, force, torque, RPM, rate of penetration, to using the AI to convert that information into what is the rock properties. So things like rock hardness and so on. And AI is particularly adept at classification. And so yeah, it's a very interesting way of doing it.
Rate of penetration. I thought we were getting way off track for a moment.
Yeah.
I was like, say what?
So we're gonna turn
I feel
this
like we just
into
switched topics.
the Casual Engineers podcast. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Now, how much of your degree deals with geology?
Uh, I would say probably 50% of it.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
so my PhD research in particular, the school owns a mine up in the mountains here in Colorado, and it is a metamorphic hard rock mine, which is different than oil and gas. But we have a coring rig that I actually spent probably about 4 years on the rig, putting together sensors and then just drilling holes in the mountain in order to collect data and collect rock for my research itself. So it was very much, it was very fun being a PhD student while going underground, getting greasy, turning wrenches, and yeah, making hole in rock. That yeah, very very unique experience. So if anyone is in the area and wants to go underground, let me know and I can give you a tour under an active mine. Yeah,
Cool.
yeah,
I'm like a geology hobbyist. I don't know a whole lot about it, but it interests the heck out of me.
yeah. A lot of people make fun of people that like rocks, but I like rocks. It's the geology is very fascinating because it tells the history of the world, beyond humanity. It tells how the earth was made, and I think that's awesome.
Do you, Kurt, do you listen to podcasts?
I do sometimes. I used to a lot, but I haven't a lot anymore. I've been addicted to YouTube's rabbit hole, which is a bad thing, I admit. But
Oh, yeah, I did that till 4 in the morning the other day.
exactly.
Uh, yeah, it's bad. The reason I'm asking is, have you heard
Mhm.
of the Geology Flannelcast?
Mm-mm. No, I'll have to check them
It,
out.
it is the only geology podcast that I'm aware of. I subscribe to it. I listen to it
Yeah.
religiously. But you said something that they have in their intro, which is like some recording from a movie or like a TV show, movie, or whatever. And the guy's like,
Uh-huh.
I love rocks. I love rocks. As soon as you said that,
Uh-huh.
oh, that clip was in my head. That was hysterical.
Yep.
And I was talking to I think it was Linda Turnbull. I had her on, and where she was living in Utah, I was like, "Do you know you're surrounded by 3 super volcanoes?" She was like, "What?" And I was like, and then come to find out, her and Max would go and ride dirt bikes, and what she didn't know was she was riding on a volcano.
Yeah.
So it's little
Very
things
cool.
like that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. The Western U.S. is yeah, filled with volcanoes. It's very interesting. Like
Yeah.
Colorado has in southern Colorado has like the largest or the second largest volcanic eruption in Earth's history. Super volcano, and it's one of those like you never know until people tell you. Yeah.
Wow. So what, E8 or E7 then eruption?
I think VEI 9.
That's what I mean, VEI. Don't, yeah,
Yeah, I think. Um,
a 9. Oh, I was thinking it went up to 8. Okay.
maybe I'm wrong, but it was like literally one of the largest ever. Yeah, I'd have to
Yeah, there's
look
a
it up.
I want to say the US has had 3 of the top 4.
Hmm.
So, yeah, we're doomed
Like
at some point.
it even puts Yellowstone to shame, like how big of an eruption it was. So, well,
It's
I mean,
craziness.
it's an extinct volcano now, so pretty much impossible to erupt again. But yeah,
Right.
however,
It did happen.
not totally impossible either. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
So, is it really extinct? All right. So you grew up in Colorado.
yep.
Did you grow up hunting, fishing, that type of stuff?
Nope. So I did Boy Scouts, and so I did a lot of backpacking and camping. But not a lot of hunting, and just my parents just weren't interested in hunting. Like they were okay with outdoorsing and all that, but they my parents were very much of the nature of like you can buy meat at the store, so why would you go out and hunt it, right? so and then my dad had guns when we were young, but at some point my parents must have had a moral panic because they sold all of them, and uh, didn't really get into guns until I was really a teenager. Um, but yeah, no
So
hunting.
how did that happen? How did you get into guns?
So my best friend growing up, him and his dad went hunting every year, and his dad was like the revolver guy, the classic black black powder muzzle loading hunting revolver guy, and his
So the
excuse
Jay
for
Slater of Colorado.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Um, cool dude. But yeah, he so like they would take me, when they would get ready, practice to go hunting or something. They would always take me to the range, or we go clay shooting or something. And his dad was I think like professional skeet shooter at one point, like really into competitive skeet shooting. Um, I think that was before I was a kid even, but yeah, he was so we'd go shooting a lot, or I'd go shooting with them, and the black powder. They explained the reason for it isn't just because they were like being old boons, but because hunting's super popular here in Colorado. So long rifle season is always full of idiots and stuff. So their excuse was they could go out in the woods and not worry about getting shot by people that don't know what they're doing. But they also made a whole deal out of getting the leather get up and canvas tents and and like horses and everything. So
Oh,
yeah, they
wow.
enjoyed it. Yeah. Like I said,
Okay.
I never went, but I saw many pictures and heard many stories. And then I want to say, when I was, I guess I didn't buy my first gun until I was in college, and so at that point I was pretty into video games, and I think that was part of it. Of like, hey, let's go get some guns and just have fun, like learn. Instead of just on screen, it'd be cool to go to the range and learn how to be proficient with it. And I learned a great deal about like the importance of self defense from my friend and his dad, as well as just gun safety in general from them. And so I ended up just getting interested and decided to. My very first gun was, I want to say it was a Chinese knockoff of a Remington 870. I believe I
Oh,
still have it
wow.
somewhere, and it's an absolute garbage gun, but I had a lot of fun with it.
Does it work?
It does. It does
Okay.
work.
That's all that
um,
matters.
yep. And then of course, like everybody else, I bought a Mosin Nagant, right? And that was had good fun with that, and I just remember being so mad that like at least the rifle I had, which I assume was kind of like how all of the rifles were, was zeroed for when the bayonet was attached. So when the bayonet wasn't
Oh, wow.
attached, it would drastically shift the zero, like by like I don't even, like off the top of my head, I would say at least 12 MOA shift, if not bigger than that. With
Wow.
between the and obviously I don't want to always shoot the gun with the bayonet attached. In fact, I rarely did. So I like remember taking the gun out to like my front porch with like a block of wood and a big hammer and just like wailing on the front sight to like readjust it, and then it was sufficiently zeroed in my mind after that.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
And for
then
those of you pistol shooters who don't deal in MOA, that's 12 inches at 100 yards.
yeah, yeah, and I want to say
That's
it
a
was probably even more than that. I'm just ballparking off the top of my head now. Yeah.
gotcha. Okay.
Um, and then after I turned 21, I bought a Springfield XD45, and that was actually on recommendation of my friend's dad because he was a revolver guy, but he I guess he got one of those and was convinced that semi-autos were okay enough. And so he actually convinced me to get one of those because it's still 45, it's still man's caliber, and I've got big hands, so it like the gun fit me well, and I enjoyed it. Um, and that was the first gun I
I
shot
also
USPSA
had an
with.
XD45 at one time.
Nice, and
Yeah.
I still have it actually, and I even so like I smoke cigars, and I even have like a Cuban cigar box that I got like back when I was first when I first got the thing. So I got this Cuban cigar box, and then like got a foam insert and cut it out so like the gun fits inside the cigar box, and uh so I'd be that cool dude that like you want a cigar, and it's just like my 45, and I still keep that gun on my nightstand just because.
Okay. I like
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Cool. So, how did you find USPSA then?
yeah. So when I moved back to Colorado for my master's, so my dad had known I was into shooting, and his whole deal was always, if you think you're good at something, go compete, find out you're not, and find out what it means to get good, right? So I was like, okay, this would be it'd be fun to shoot, and so he actually went out and found USPSA, and basically he's like, all right, we're going. so he got himself I don't remember what he bought at the time, maybe like a Jericho or something, and so we went to our first USPSA match and got immediately hooked. And I think too for him it was a like a father son bonding thing of like, I've been out of state and for years and so coming back into state, he wanted to do something together. So we did that, and yeah, his logic was definitely right. Of like, if you think you're good, go out and compete against actual people that know what they're doing, and find out you're not good.
Right.
Yeah, and so that yeah, that's how I got into it. I shot that XD probably for about 6 months, and then my dad actually bought me the Shadow 2, my first Shadow 2, as like a I think he got it as a graduation present for my master's. Um, and so we
Nice.
yeah, so it was a nice gift, and that really settled the addiction in at that point.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, at that point, now you have a nice gun to shoot. Now there's no reason not to. You've
yeah,
got the crack
exactly.
addiction and the gun, so you're good.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
I swear it's like crack. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
everybody who goes,
Mm-hmm.
it's like I shot it one time and I got hooked. Like, yep, it's crack.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so what division are you shooting?
So nowadays I'm shooting carry optics. Is my main division. There was a time where I did PCC for a few years, 2 or 3 years, something like that. And then at least locally, I got tired of shooting PCC because there weren't any good. There was only like one other good PCC shooter that lived about an hour away from me, and so we would occasionally shoot matches together. And so I just got bored, kind of beating all the old guys that were shooting PCC. Um, and at that and at that time, so I made GM, and I went to the Area 3 match, and like that was my first ever major, and like level 3 major, and I was I had fun. I placed about as well as I expected to, which was I don't even remember now, but like maybe 10th GM, like one of the lowest GMs. But I had fun. I learned a lot, and but I came back from that. I was like, all right, do I want to spend another year uh, and try to be competitive at area matches, or do I want to but be bored locally, which is most of my shooting anyway, or do I want to like switch to kind of where everyone's going to, which is including the heat in our state, which is carry optics. So I decided, hey, I'd rather shoot with other good people most of the time than spend thousands of dollars to go shoot with good people I don't know some of the time. Um,
There you go.
yeah, so I did switch to carry optics, and I was really garbage at it at first because going from rifle only to pistol is a big transition. But I quickly picked it
Yeah.
up, and yeah, now I'm actually percentage wise a master's in carry optics now, and yeah, really enjoy it.
Okay. Awesome. So I assume it's your Shadow 2.
Yep, yep. So
Okay.
Shadow 2, I use the 507 comp on it now.
Oh,
I
how do you
don't.
like that?
I think it's fantastic optic. I think if you're in the market for a new optic, that's the one to buy. If you already have an SRO, uh, don't get rid of it and get a 507, right? But if you're looking for a new optic, get a 507, right? That's kind of like my logic for it. I think it's a fantastic optic. I think the window is better than the SRO.
In what
Just like
way?
I just feel like visually you can see more, even though like the width is the same. I think the corners adds a little more visual
Look,
space
okay.
of the
Do
square
you think it's
corners.
any more? Is the clarity any better?
If it's any better, it's very slight, and I think it has slightly less distortion. And I think part of that goes to the
Okay.
square. The square window is at least visually makes the distortion, reduces it. And then dot wise, I use the two MOA dot on it. I think the other
Ooh.
reticles are just too noisy on it. And I've come so because I shoot one MOA dots on my rifles, and I've come to even on the pistol like the smaller dots better. I know that's kind of controversial, but to me, I've got good enough vision with my glasses or contacts that just turning the brightness up on the smaller dot, I think is to me I can see it and it's more accurate for me than using a big dot. Um, and you know, right, and I think like whether I pick up the dot really depends on my more of my mental focus, more so than the dot itself, the equipment itself.
Okay. Red or green dot?
Red for me.
Okay. Do you have any color vision deficiency?
No, no.
Okay. Because I know, like for me, I do. I have a red green color issue.
Mm,
So the red for me, I don't think I could ever do a one or two MOA dot.
mm,
Yeah, I just wouldn't be able to pick it up very well. But the green, on the other hand, I could do a one or two MOA dot because I can pick that up way easier than the red. So I almost feel like something from Hollow Sun. I'm almost wondering if the ring would actually help me because I might pick it up quicker than just the dot. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, and I think it definitely comes down to like eyesight as well, like what is the best like dot and reticle size. Eyesight's a huge part of it, obviously, because you need to see it, right? So
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
But I think it goes even beyond that because even when I had 2010, like I had 2010 vision probably till I was 40 years old.
Mm,
And then I had 2012 up to about almost 50 years old. And then all of a sudden I needed readers. And now it's like, what the hell is going on?
mm,
Um, but even then, the red with that red green issue, it's like red just did not stand out.
mm.
So I've never been a fan of using red for anything because my eyes just don't pick up red the way most people's eyes pick up red. So
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. So,
yeah,
but yeah,
so
I have a green dot that I bought one to test on. I have a Taurus TX22 comp as well, to shoot our steel action matches here, which I don't do that often. But so I did pick one up. It's sitting on that gun, and like I've got no problem using it. I think it just depends on, like I said, like yeah, your vision, your eyesight,
yeah,
color
all of those things.
deficiencies. Like if you have an astigmatism, the smaller dots is a problem, right? And like brighter dots are a problem. So yeah, all those things. I think it just personalize what works best for you. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm with you. And that's why I wanted to point that out because there's so many different pieces of vision. It's not just, oh, can do you have 2020? It goes
right.
way beyond that. So
Yeah, exactly. And like same thing with grips too. Like so, I shoot Shadow twos, right? And so everyone makes a big deal about the grips on Shadow twos. And like my best advice is figure out what works for your hands, right? Everyone's hands are different, different sizes, different shapes. Like the grips all just depend on what works best for you. And the way I figured out how to do that is I've ended up buying a whole bunch of different ones, different sizes, shapes, weights, and just went out and tested them. Now, obviously, that's an expensive route to do it, but um, you know,
yeah,
but just in general, it's find out what works best for your hands, and I think that when shooting, like that's like the two fundamentals I think for shooting are eyesight, like vision, and grip. And if you can get your hands to fit to the gun and you can see, good target focus and you can still see the sights, then that's all you need for equipment. And then you need it to be reliable, obviously. But
right.
right, and so that's like always my biggest advice to people is just like find the grip that works for you rather than just like what's the current in thing when it comes to equipment.
And I agree with that because like that XD fit my hands very nicely.
Yeah,
I liked the feel of those of that grip.
yeah,
So I wholeheartedly agree. I can't do a small grip because I don't feel like I can really grab the thing. I like a chunkier grip,
yeah,
you know.
yeah,
That's I prefer that. So
yeah.
I like those much, and I agree with you. I mean that those are the that's why I don't like the. I think the grip angle matters too, which is why I'm not a big fan of the Glock.
Hmm.
It feels
Right,
okay
right.
in my hand, but the grip angle itself is different than what I'm so used to. So I
Yeah,
like a chunkier 1911 style grip.
yeah. I'm in the same boat as you. I think Glocks were great for a lot of people, but like for me, the
Mm-hmm.
grip angle is just doesn't work. Yeah,
I,
and then because I
I'm
have kind of meaty hands, I get a lot of the slide bite as well. It just doesn't work for Glocks for me.
yeah, I'm with you. So at what point now? So you've been competing. You did some PCC stuff. Now you're doing carry optics. At what point did you decide to create your Instagram page of competition shooting analytics?
So that actually goes back to when I was still shooting PCC. So in 2021, so I had shot. I made GM, and I made GM on Diamond Cutter, which I don't remember the number of Diamond Cutter, but I shot a 20 hit factor on Diamond Cutter,
Whoa.
and which in and of itself is kind of a funny story. Um, so I went to this match. I set up the classifier, right? Like they had me set up the classifier. I was helping set up that day, and then we come to go to shoot it, and this is back when you could still like pay to reshoot, and I guess you still can
Yeah,
pay
you still
to
can.
reshoot
It's
once.
$5 for a reshoot.
Yeah, so I went and shot it, and I shot like a 14 hit factor, and one of my mentors on the stage, he he was just jokingly, he's like, "You're gonna pay the $5, and I just want you to shoot it full retarded, just go full speed, go full retarded." Yeah, exactly. Because
Uh,
I well, I really love PCC because I can just go full tilt, no fucks given. Um, Speed, and it can get, yeah, and I can either throw a lot of shots where I can connect them all, and it's a lot of glory, right? So he wanted me to do it again, so I was like, all right, sure. So we set up, and so Diamond Cutter, for those who aren't aware, for pistol, it's a turn and draw, and there's four targets that are all partials with no shoots on them at 10 yards, I think, off the top of my head. And so it's a turn and draw and shoot. With PCC, you can do it. It's facing downrange, so you're facing the targets, right? So my second go, I shoot it in 2 seconds flat. So 8 shots, 2 seconds flat, with all alphas, and so that ended up with a 20 hit factor. So the
wow.
match director, he was on my squad, and he's also he was like an M class shooter at the time, BCC shooter, and so he saw me do it, and he's like, "Fuck it, I'm doing it again." So he goes to his car because he was shooting like open, I think that day. He goes to his car, gets his PCC out, comes to shoot a second gun, and he shoots it, and I think he got like a 16 or something, and or maybe an 18 even, and uh, and then another guy, which he told me later, like 6 months later or something. But another guy, like there were like people were like, no fucking way these guys shot that high of a hit factor, right? So like before the match was over, like he went out and measured everything to make sure we set it up correctly, and we did. Um, but I was after that day I was like, so Derek from Practical Shooting Insights at that time was posting was like starting to post some like high scores on different classifiers. And so I was hoping, I was like, well, will he ever post Diamond Cutter high scores? Because I want to know, like, where does that 20 hit factor stack up? Well, he never did. He got into other stuff, but so I basically was like, all right, well, I know how to program, and I can do data analytics pretty well because that's literally what my PhD is a data analytics project. So I went and wrote a script to go and download all of the USPSA data off of USPSA. Yeah, that's Diamond Cutter.
Yeah,
Um, so I
I'm
went and
just
downloaded.
cropping it.
Yeah, so I went and downloaded all of the script, all of the scores off of USPSA off their website. And so I looked it up. I was like, all right, where do I stack up? Let me hold up. I need to pull up the numbers
Okay.
as well.
I don't think I've ever shot Diamond Cutter. Looking at it, it does look like it'd be a fun one. It also looks like if you're not careful, it would crush you.
Yeah, so it's a low point match, or it's a low point, sorry, stage. So, and with the no shoots, that like exactly right. If you're not
Yeah,
careful, it will eat your
it'll
lunch.
yeah, you'll zero that quick.
Yeah. So yeah. So I got the
And
data
it's
here.
Virginia count. Oh
Yep.
Lord.
Yep. Virginia count. 8 shots, and those hard partials, and there's like maybe 50% A zone, and they're in weird ways too. Like you can see, like the center two targets, kind of like down the middle of the A zone, and then the
Right.
top of the A zone. So it's a pretty tough classifier, but if you land your shots, you can score high, right? Um, if you hit all alpha, even with the slower time, you can actually score pretty well. So yeah, so I downloaded all the data. I've got it here, and I've got all of the data through 2022. I haven't. Well, I guess I did download 2023, so this includes 2023 up to about 2 months ago. Um, and so my score, let's say all divisions. So I'm number one on all divisions with 20 hit factor, so high score. And the next highest score, at least when I first downloaded it in 2022, the next highest score was the match director that shot it with me. And then after that was like a, let's see the dates here. Oh, so it's 2018. Okay, so yeah, so the next score is a 19 hit factor, and then the match director, and then a 17 hit factor, and so like yeah, pretty much blew that out of the water. And all the high scores are all PCC. The reason is because you don't have to turn and draw, right? It's just immediately going up
Right.
on the target. Um, no reloads, no nothing. So I was like, oh yeah, sweet. So I do have the all time high on one classifier stage. But it also made me wonder too. At the same time, back then it was is because I remember before I switched to PCC, I was shooting production, and right before I switched, I would have made A class, but they had just updated all the hit factors, and
Mm.
they had changed them. And I think that was probably 2018, but they had changed all the hit factors, and it was obvious that it was significantly more difficult than it was before they updated them in 2018. And so part of what I wanted to find out was obviously, do I have the high score, which I do, and um, not only that, but what's the like how is high hit factor actually set, right? Because if they all updated them, the common logic is a high hit factor means everyone assumes it means the highest score ever shot, right? Because that's what high hit factor kind of insinuates. It's in the name, right? The highest score ever shot. And so
Right.
I wanted to look it up. It's like, well, what is that actually true? Especially since they updated them all at once, or a bunch of them all at once. It was a massive jump. Is it actually the highest score? And if not, what's the method that they set it, right? And we've heard all sorts of different logic that they've used, like the average of the best five, or the average of the best three, or you name it, right? They come up with that. So I download all the data, and so that was like my two motivations to downloading the data and starting the Instagram account was, how do they actually do this? What do the scores really look like? Right? Like is it a normal distribution? Do we have a bell curve, a skill bell curve? Like what does that actually look like? Like when we think of like another thing people commonly think is 95% should be the top 5% of scores, right? The top 5 percentile, right? And then the should be GM, and from 85 to 95 should be, so like everyone who's like above 85% of the scores, right? So the top 15% of the scores should be M class, right? And as you go down the list, so that's like the common logic is there should be that top 5% uh, should be GM, right? Because that's how our hit factor works. For when you look at, you type in the calculator, right? You got say 85%. You're like, all right, awesome, that's a master. So that's a top 15% score. And the reality is performance is on a bell curve, to some degree, and so that's actually not true. So this
Oh,
the top 5% does not correlate to the top 5 percentile, because actual performance is on a bell curve. It's nonlinear, versus percentile, or like the percent of your hit of the high hit factor is linear. So it's a misconception, as well as people that say go to nationals and they're A class, and they're like, and they said, all right, I'm gonna make sure I'm 75% of, I like have a finished match score of 75% because I'm an A class shooter, so I expect 75%. Well, that's not true, because again, performance is on a bell curve. And so when you show up and shoot against Niels or Christian Seiler or whoever it is, right? Um, your performance relative to them is not linear, right? So if you're a class shooter and you expect to shoot 75%, like that's tough. That's not going to be an easy day or an easy three
right.
days, right? It's
Yeah,
not going to be an easy match to shoot that much. And if you are able to shoot 75% of Niels, you're really should be probably master level shooter or a high A, right? Like
I
if you're
agree.
if you're a low
Yeah.
A, you don't expect to shoot that high. And so and that's just like the truth of it, right? So yeah, so I looked up, and so I started making charts of what do the classifiers look like, and as well as, since I've been able to download the data, I can look at like how many GMs are there, what's the breakdown in divisions participation, the state participation. That was a little bit more difficult to find, to figure out, but I was able to do that. Um, um, and just looking at other analytics aspects of shooting as well, and of major shooting. So like I have one post where you can see the looking at the 2022 classifier or nationals, speaking on that nonlinearity, and it's very interesting because it's very linear all the way up until about 95%, and then that top 5% just skyrockets above everybody else. Um,
Now, where is that 2022 that you just mentioned? The
so that's
Nationals.
yeah, that's so here in this post, this is from 2022 nationals. So I looked at every shooter at nationals, and found their classification percentage. So like what is their official classification percentage, and that's on the x-axis, and then the match finish is on the y-axis. Um, so like the match percentage, which you have the y-axis cropped out here, but the very top line there, that's 100% match finish. Um, and you can see here in the classification is it's very linear all the way up till about that 90% classification, 90-95%. And those top scorers go very nonlinear very quickly, and a big part of that is because those guys mostly shoot majors, not classifiers. So that's part of why it's that way. So their
Okay.
classification percentage comes from shooting majors. But anyway, we see like nice clear straight line, and then suddenly boom, big jump in performance. And
Yeah.
so it kind of points out that like classifiers or classification percentage only tells a small story, but there still is a good correlation between your classification and your actual match performance too at the same time. So it's one of those that like it works, but it doesn't work, but it does work, but it doesn't work situations, for classification.
And it's funny you say that because I've had some people on and it's been talked about a little bit. And one of the things they say is, if like what you're saying, if they're a GM, or we'll take master. I think that's a better one. Let's say their classification score is actually 85, so they're just in the master rating. They're looking at an hoping an 80 or an 82 match performance at nationals. They know there's going to be a dip there because of all of these things you're saying.
Right.
And I mean, I put my cursor where the 60 percentile individual would cross, and it's probably about 55.
Yeah. And if you like it
So
at 80%, it comes in at about 70. 72% or so at finish.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you
Ex-
were 75 and you were expecting to finish 75%, like that's tough. And you can see there are a couple people around that like 75 percentile, that the 75 classification percent, that are, see above the black line, that did finish above 75%, but it's it's above average, if you will, right?
Well, and even so, then I went to 90 just now, and I put
Yeah,
my cursor there. I mean, we're looking at right at 80%.
yeah,
So there is a big dip. You're right.
yeah. And if you look at the other posts on that post, it's kind of true regardless of division here. It's kind of the same axiom here.
Now you have two lines here. You have a
Yeah.
red
So,
and a black.
so red is limited 10 and limited, both limited.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I see it
But
up there
you'll see
now.
even the limited 10, so I have the red line still being linear to 100, but you can even see really at around the 90 percentile, it still tails upwards. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. And then PCC and production, because they were both over the
Wow.
same event. Yeah.
It seems to be even a larger curve or a sooner curve, like closer to the 90% mark. Yeah. Or 80, actually. I mean, wow. Whoa. Look at that. Revolver even starts what? At about 75% roughly. And then it curves upward pretty quickly. Wow. Now, you've mentioned that you feel that the classifier system is broken in a way. What do you feel needs to be done to get it back on track?
I wanted to say something. I guess I was muted. You can see revolver here in red. There's a great example of, it's a small number of shooters, but the best shooters in revolver are phenomenal and above and beyond the rest. And you can see that like last little percentage point, there's a massive shift upwards, right? There's that
Yes.
right, and that's because there's probably four or five revolver shooters that are hands and significantly better than everyone else. There's a small number of revolver shooters nationally, and um, so it's really obvious that the best shooters are significantly better than the average shooter, right? Or like, and I would call average really being people that are 95% and lower in USPSA, kind of being the average shooter versus like the super squad guys, right? And that's true really kind of in any division. Um, so really that like GM and super GM is a big difference. But to look at uh, uh, classifiers specifically and why I think they're broken, let me or have problems. Let me send you a link of an actual classifier here that we can look at,
Okay.
just so we can look at the bell curves. So this is TikTok, 1305 TikTok. It's a off the table start, and there's four targets kind of in a clock like pattern with a no shoot in between them, and it's shoot two at each target, reload off the table, shoot two. Um, right, so kind of like a standard classifier. You got reloads, you've got no shoots, even off the table starts. So like it should be kind of relatively open, right? To open in terms of like you can shoot it, and there you got the scores here. Um, so to explain this graph, let me explain this graph first, right? Um, so there's a lot going on in this graph, that so there's a lot of information being dumped in your face and presented in a single picture here. So if you could, I guess, zoom out a tiny bit,
What would you like me to zoom in on
or
particularly?
I guess just to see the y-axis label.
The what label?
The y-axis label, the percentage of shooters here on
A
the
little
left.
more?
Yeah,
How
like
about
that.
there we
Yeah,
go.
that's good.
Okay.
Okay, so I've got three different graphs being displayed on one, right? So we got the bell curve on the bottom. That's what's called the probability density function, and then under that is the histogram for the shooters. Sorry, let me back up. Right. So on the x-axis, which is on the bottom, that's the hit factor. So that's all of the scores in terms of hit factor from 0 to the maximum score, or about, I guess, about 13 here. And then on the y-axis is percentage, right? So from 0 to 100 represents 0 being, the worst shooter, and 100 being the best shooter. And what that means is, at the 100% mark, means all of the shooters shot less than this hit factor, right? So we go to this top one, this, one right next to your cursor, that's like a 12 something. So every score underneath that is, fits below that 12 hit factor. So that's what the 12.5 hit factor, whatever that is. That's what percentage of shooters means, right? So if we go to if we go to 6, that on the graph is about 40%, right? So 40% of shooters shot a 6 hit factor or less. So that's what the percentage in this graph is saying. So the bell curve and the histogram on the bottom now means is from this percentage to this percentage. This is the percentage of shooters that shot this score, right? So the way I have the bins for the histogram is like half um, class, right? So like from C to B, right? So there's two different there's two bins for the C class, and then from B to A, right? There's two different bins from B to A. So like the average here, or the median, is what is that? About a 7 or so, and that's 22% of shooters have shot between basically between C and B, right? So like the middle of C to B. Okay, so that's what the histogram on the bottom is showing. That's called the probability density function, and that's just putting a curve to the histogram. And then the S curve that shows all the blue data points, that is the cumulative density function, and that is, again, the X percentage of shooters shot this hit factor or less. And so the blue dots are the actual data points. So this is all of the scores. And for this post in particular, it's from 2017 to 2022. So all of the scores during that time, for open division, plotted on this plot right here. So, and then what I do is I curve fit the CDF to it, and then I use the CDF to define the probability density function, right? So as you can see, it's not a perfect fit, because what I actually use here is a Weibull distribution, which is a modification of the normal distribution. So real performance here is not a perfect normal distribution or a perfect bell curve, but it's pretty close, as it looks, right? It's pretty close. Okay. So on these vertical lines here, I have high hit factor, GM, M, A, B, C, and average. And what those lines are is, here's the formal definition of what the cutoff is for each classification. And what you can see here in the upper right is there's a score that's higher than high hit factor, right?
Yes.
And then it goes down the list from there, right? So every single classifier I look at, so like if you click over to the next slide, right? So limited, same deal. There's a bunch of scores higher than hit factor, and if we go slide
Yeah.
further to the right, carry optics. So I got all the divisions here in this post, and you can see, everyone kind of performs in this nice clean, normal distribution. You can see in carry optics even more so. Look how close of a match that is to that distribution.
Yeah. That's almost perfect.
Right. And another thing to point out is, if you look down at the zero, at zero, is because USPSA doesn't record negative hit factors, right? If you're less than 0, it posts it as 0. So essentially what that does is that shifts the curve up slightly, kind of like, truncates the curve still at 100.
Okay.
So it's not, so you, right, because we can't go lower than 0 in the score, in the formal officially recorded scores. we don't have a perfect tail, but that's fine. It's real data, right? Um,
Right.
but we can keep, no matter what classifier we look at, we get a bunch that are higher in high hit factor, right? And everyone conforms pretty accurately to a normal distribution, or really a Weibull distribution if you're into statistics, which is close to a normal distribution. Um, and since we're looking at optics, let me look at the scores for that. So from 2017 to 2022, there were 5,770 official scores for optics, right? And the average hit factor here is that 5.4, with the highest being 11.37, right? So that's the 11.37 is higher than high hit factor, right? So that means with the data here, we got 0.07% at over 100% over the high hit factor. We've got 0.59% are GM, 3% are M, 9.7% are A, and 32% are B. So remember what I was saying earlier is we think, right, when we commonly think of the scores, we think high hit factor is the highest score. It's not true. We also think that top 5% is GM, right? Well, in this case, it's 0.5% are GM scores or better, right? And we normally think then that the top 15%, which would be 85%, right, would be masters. In this case, it's 3% are master scores,
That's
right?
crazy.
And that's the nature of the bell curve, right? The true nature of performance is right, and lots of people talk about this in other aspects of life, and how, but sports in particular is a very clear example of like the very tail of the curve is where you get the real big people, the really high performers and the big names are in that tail of the curve on the right side of the curve here. And it's very true in USPSA as well. And these are just of the classifiers. Remember, we looked at national scores where the people that are winning nationals are in the far right tail of the top performers on the national scale too. So even
Right.
this classifier, right, that the national performers are all in that like top 0.1% point or less, right? So it's uh um yeah, so it's not linear, right? um so is that a reason why it's broken? No, no, because real performance is not linear, right? We got this bell curve that's real performance. So where it's broken is how is high hit factor set. Okay, so in this for optics here, this is 0.59% our GM scores. If I go to limited, it's 0.27%. Right. And I'll just read off the numbers here. But I put the numbers on the post too for people that will go and see it. For open, it's 0.3%. For PCC, it's 0.3%. For production, it's 0.4%. For shingle stack, it's 0.0% of the top scores are GM, 0.07%. Right. So
Wow.
in comparison to on this particular stage, TikTok, um, the GM scores on average are about 0.3% of the top scores are GM. However, for single stack, it's less, right? And it's significantly less, 0.07. Okay. And we can also look at like the master scores, right? And compare those. And you get kind of a similar story. So we would say for this particular example that this classifier is harder and perhaps significantly harder for single stack shooters than it is for everyone else, right? And we might think of some performance reason why that might be, but it's 8 shots, so it shouldn't be anything particular, right? It's 8 shot reload, 8 shot, and so it's not a performance thing. It's they have set the high hit factor to be more difficult for single stack shooters for whatever reason, right? So if you want to pull up the next post that I sent you, The It's a fixed time classifier.
There
Okay.
we go. Now we're
Yeah.
on.
So Thunder and Lightning. So, well, I am clicking through the wrong stuff myself. Okay. So Thunder and Lightning, right? Um, so you're on the limited. Go to the open. Let's just look through all of them, right? So look at the open, right? So we can see the bell curve, right? The bell curve's not matching. We're
No.
not fitting the bell curve. And on open, there's 2,792 attempts. So there's plenty of data within this one that we should be able to come up with a bell curve, but we're not, right? So if you go to the next one, we'll just scroll through all of them real quick. Carry optics, right
Gets
before
closer.
it gets closer, right? And before we saw carry optics as a good fit. Limited, no bell curve. PCC, well, there's something weird going on there. There's no
Yeah.
tail. It just it's just at the peak, right?
Right.
Production's pretty
Oh,
good, right?
yeah.
Production's
That's
pretty good.
close.
And single stack, that's pretty close. And
Yeah, that's not
revolver,
too
it's
bad.
reasonably close for the small numbers. But so the reason why maybe production might work and this one doesn't. So fixed time. So this is a 3 string, and there's a 75-foot position, a 45-foot position, and a 30-foot position. And we've got strong hand and weak hand only, right? So if you can imagine, if you're an iron sight guy and you got a strong hand, weak hand, like this might actually be a decent test of skill, right? From 75 feet or 25 yards and in.
25 yards, right.
So it might actually be a good measure. But for PCC, you're using the and I'm a GM PCC guy that I'm allowed to complain about this one as somebody who's gamed the system on one of these fixed times. But for PCC, you can look at our scores here for PCC. Just imagine, right? We got a fixed time. So we got I think what is it? Uh, I don't have the number of time, but it's I don't know, it's like 6 seconds or something. So it's a pretty long time. And strong hand is the same normal position, and weak hand, if you're intelligent with a rifle, is still pretty easy to do, right? So we've got strong hand and weak hand, and the other thing with weak hand or with a reload into weak hand too with the PCC is you could start on your weak hand side and reload into it, as basically switching shoulders. Like you can look at PCC, and PCC, the percentage of scores that are GM, 10.7%, right? 10.7%. And remember on on TikTok that we looked at, it was 0.3%.
Right.
Okay, so there's something wrong right there, right? That means that every stage is not created equal in terms of scoring up and getting a higher class. And what we find is for the fixed time stages is it's ridiculously easy for PCC shooters to make it. And for optics guns, it's much easier as well. So like if you scroll up and look at the optics scores, it's kind of the same story. So carry optics 1.4% GM, open 5.3% GM, um, limited 0.7%. Okay, so kind of back down in that spectrum. Okay, so in my opinion, how classifiers are broken is we've got a couple things going on. One, there's no competitive equity between divisions. So people would say, well, you're competing against the division, your own division. It doesn't actually matter. And I think that's not true. I think it does matter. And especially when your highest division, whatever your highest division is, your next highest, if you switch to another division, you're only ever one ranked lower than your highest division. So a guy like me, that GMPCC, I can pick up a revolver, and I did, shot it for 4 matches, and I'm instantly an M-class revolver shooters, right? So there's some competitive equity problems that, like, fairness wise, if a really good revolver shooter like Jay Slater, like if he struggled to make M, which I know he's a GM, but if he's like me, I just show up, shoot 4 matches, and I'm an M, and so at that point, that the classification title is kind of meaningless if you can game it by switching divisions like that. So there's some competitive equity problems. So like in my opinion, the classifier should be equally difficult percentage wise between divisions to score this, to get GM or to get masters, and so on. So we have that competitive equity problem between divisions, right? Um, then there's also between stages, right? So obviously these fixed time stages are way easier for PCC, and they are easier for the optics divisions as well. And so it's you know now if your match director, if you know your match director, or your match director suddenly wants to game the classification systems too, is you just go pick the fixed time stages, right? Go pick the fixed time stages, and you can get a bunch of your shooters, especially PCC shooters, to score up and class up really fast, right? So now there's a
Mm.
equity problem between stages, and and in my opinion, that's also a problem, because the reason a lot of the stages are picked is, well, it's easier to set up, or we shot it before, or whatever, and so you might have stages, like TikTok, which are really difficult but are a good measure of skill, that people shoot all the time because it's easy to set up. But then another club could be running these fixed time stages and boosting up their PCC shooters really fast, or their open guys really fast. But like the revolver guys and the production guys don't want to shoot that match anymore because they're shooting these hard stages, right? And guess what? We see a drop in production in these iron sight divisions. And I wouldn't say it's because of the classifiers per se, but it's a contributing
It just
factor, right?
adds to it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fuel to the fire. So and so we could look at, and I have looked at, on my page, a whole bunch of classifiers, and it's kind of the same story for all of them, where um, we'll pull up. I'll just pull it randomly. Pull up another one. Um, and typically, what the scores look like to me is, um, that limited, for whatever reason, the high hit factors for limited, make limited the hardest division to rank up. Production typically is the second hardest, and then open, and then carry optics, and then PCC, right? So for whatever reason, there's this disparity between divisions for the high hit factors for resulting, the actual resulting scores. And then it doesn't matter which score you look at, the high hit factor is almost never the highest score ever, right? And they, whoever sets it, and I believe it's the director of marketing, Jake Martins. I believe he does this actual recommendations for hit factor changes. However, it's done is it's not done in a clear, concise, repeatable manner for defining the hit factors, and um, and and they always go up, right? So that's another complaint. You'll hear at your local match is, oh, these stages shot out. It's been shot too many times. I think that concept of it being shot out is bullshit, right? Because if it's a good measure of skill, it should always be a good measure of skill for a stage, right? So the idea of it being shot out, it means that USPSA has continually raised the high hit factor to a point where it's too difficult, is what that means. Um, Versus raising it to a level that we're like, hey, we've shot this classifier across USPSA tens of thousands of times, so we know what good performance looks like. So we should select a hit factor that makes sense rather than continually increasing it, right? So it's the concept is bullshit in the sense of they're not raising the high hit factor because a bunch of people have heroed and zeroed it over the years, and it's too difficult. It's bullshit, and purely because they USPSA sets it higher, one way or another, and when they really shouldn't be, right? Um,
Okay. So let me ask you this: since we have limited on the screen here, the
yeah,
lightning and thunder, not 0909.
yeah,
Hold on. Now, so this is where it gets interesting to me that So for like carry optics, you said the actual high hit factor is 86.8, and you recommend a high hit factor of 88.4. But on limited, actual high hit factor is 88.3, and you recommend lowering it. So what's the difference between why are you raising one and lowering one?
Yeah, that's a perfect question, right? So, how I've come up with my recommended hit factor is I look at the top 1 percentile. So the top 1 percentile, and say that's the top 1%, because remember we're looking at the bell curve. Top 1% should be GM, right? So what I do is I basically set the high hit factor such that the top 1% of scores are GM. So in the case of this case, the reason why I recommend raising carry optics is because the top 1% in the current high hit factor, is 1.4%. So it's easier than my recommended top 1%.
Okay.
Whereas limited, it's 0.7%. So I recommend lowering it to make it top
To
1%, right?
to boost that number up to 1.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And I recommend personally. So what that means here is, if we always set it to top 1% of scores, and if we look at, say, the scores of the last 5 years, right, and that ends up usually getting a good amount of data for all the classifiers. So if we look at top 1% of the last 5 years and do that, say, every year or every 2 years or something, sometimes that means high hit factor will go up. Sometimes that means high hit factor will go down. And if we're looking at the last 5 years, we're really kind of looking at the active shooter base in USPSA, right? And I think,
Right.
like, over time, if USPSA shooters get worse on average for whatever reason, then we can lower the GM standards, right? So that there at least are GMs, or we could arguably say we don't want to do that, right? Or if or the opposite goes, if USPSA shooters get significantly better over time, which I think I've looked at the data. I want to say people that on average USPSA shooters are getting better. Um, then we should raise GM, right? We should raise the standard so that it's that top percentile that
It's
actually
reflective.
reflective of the shooter base, as well as like the top guys, and not just some arbitrary standard. And it seems to me that high hit factor is arbitrarily set, kind of based on what whoever sets it feels like doing. And I know they have said that they do statistics like average of the best three or best five or whatever it may be. But all the data that I've looked at, and I'm using their data, all the data, or at least the data that they've published, all the data that I've looked at, which is all of the data, is doesn't reflect any particular method that they are selecting high hit factor.
Now, if you adjust this so you get 1% of GMs in that, you hit that mark you're looking for, how does that affect the other divisions
So it would
or
if
other classes, I mean?
so it would because it's setting it to there, like high hit factor, the classes would always reflect whatever the high hit factor is. So I want to say percentage wise, that ends up being like the ideal curve. I think ends up being like 5% masters. Like I don't remember off the top of my head. But essentially, it would lower the standards for all the other divisions too, right? So like if we make it easier for GMs, it's now easier for everyone else, and it's not like a
Okay, so
perfect 1-to-1. Yeah,
I got you. So even so, like carry optics, then I'll use
yeah,
that one. We'll go back. Then that means if you're raising the recommended high hit factor, then it's going to be a little bit more difficult to class up
yeah,
and not as easy.
yeah, correct.
But but the good thing is if every single classifier is treated this way, then you have equity across the board.
Yep, yeah, consistent standards, equity across the board for all the classifiers. You don't have to worry
Right.
about asking your match director to select or not select specific classifiers. Um,
Right, because then the
yeah,
only real difficulty between classifiers is the actual shooting. you
Yeah,
know?
exactly,
So,
exactly. And really, yeah, exactly. Make it performance based, and
yeah.
not some other arbitrary secret knowledge that you don't know based, or that nobody formally knows based. Yeah.
Now, do you think there's a way to correlate? So, we talk about match performance and classifier performance, two different things.
Hmm.
Um, and we've talked about how there is a difference. Like if you, again, you're a GM or a master, you go to nationals. If you're top 30%, you're hoping to be in that, 87% or higher, but that's not 95% that you're used to. So, is there a way to create classifiers you think that would be more indicative of a match performance?
I think at the national level, in particular, no. Unfortunately,
Okay.
using a stage classifier system, I don't think there's a good way of measuring performance. Now, I think there's ways we could improve with the current system, right? Like right now, for example, the it's your best six scores of your last eight that count, right?
Right.
And it's the last eight that count, which is an important note. Right, and so like if you score less than 5% below your current class, then I believe it doesn't count. So, so
Right.
so essentially, what that you end up getting, and this is I think is a problem with our classification system too, is hero or zeroing, right? Which is like what I did on Diamond Cutter, right? Which I went full retard, full speed, and I heroed it, right?
You
I got the
did.
highest score ever, right? But
Right.
if I had literally zeroed it out, then it wouldn't matter. It doesn't matter, right? It,
Nope.
and so I think that's a problem. I think if we did a every single classifier that you shoot counts, people will shoot it more conservatively, and even if you kept your class like you don't downrank, but every classifier you shoot affects your percentage. I think people would shoot it more conservatively, and your percentage would more closely represent your actual performance at a match than hero or zeroing with our current system. Um, and by every score, like every last eight or last six, right? If you scored and averaged all of those of your last six or last eight, and had a running average, like I think, and all of them counted, even if you zeroed, all of them counted. I think uh, that would improve or more accurately reflect real performance, even though people can get salty about, oh, my gun malfunctioned or something. Well, if your gun malfunctioned, too bad, you lost the match, right? Like
I
that's
mean, hey, look at
yeah,
JJ at Carry Optics Nationals. You
exactly,
know what I mean?
exactly, exactly. So I think that would improve it. I think that would improve it, and I think if we had consistent uh, high hit factors, repeatable, consistent, well defined method of setting high hit factor, I think that would improve. But I think when you look at that like top percentile, the super squad at nationals, I think there's no realistic way for an average person like me to measure how do I really perform against Max Leo Grandis and PCC unless I actually go and shoot against Max Leo Grandis at a match, right? Like there's just no way I think of accurately measuring that. But obviously the classification system works of like if I show up at a local match with PCC, I'm going to beat everybody or almost everybody. Um, so that classification still works. But if I like I said, if I were to go to Max Leo Grandis and my average is say 95%, I can guarantee you I'm not shooting 95% of Max Leo Grandis. That's just the case. And I think there's no real way of having a classification system that measures the super squad. And that's because they're so far on the right side of the bell curve that, to be realistic, you can't do it. And then the other thing with
Okay.
classifiers is they measure gun technical skills, but there's a lot they don't measure that competitive shooting includes in matches, right? So what do classifiers do? They do draws, reloads, accurate, fast shooting, um, and that's about it. So it's like a stand and blast accurate shooting, and even the movement stages, they're still, you move really quick to one position, you shoot the targets, you move really quick to the next and shoot all the targets. Whereas like at a match winning skills, right? There's more to it. With even within shooting, there's, how are you moving? How are you engaging targets while on the move? How are you blending positions? That are major skill sets that classifiers just don't measure, technical skill sets. And then there's just the match management skill set of, like, with your mind in the game, how are you focused on achieving your scores for the entire match, right? It's like a good way of doing it is you don't hero or zero any stage in a match, but you shoot consistently at or slightly above your actual real performance, right? And so classifiers don't measure that, right? They don't do it. And so I think and I think, like, no matter how you design classifier stages, you just can't capture those skill sets, right? Like, we can make blending and positions, we can make stages that do that, but as I've, transitioned to running matches locally, I've discovered is that, especially indoor matches, you you really can't do much in terms of classifiers, in terms of movement and blending positions. And then the other thing, what I noticed when we were evaluating the provisional period for the 2022 classifiers, is that the stage setup really really matters for the classifiers, especially for movement stages. So, like, if you don't set it up perfectly, if you're off by, like, one of them, for example, was I want to say 2204 or 2203. It was 2203. 2203 was a provisional stage, and oh, maybe it wasn't. All right, so yeah, so it was 2203. So 2203 double stacked was a provisional stage, which I want to give credit, really good credit to USPSA for the 22 series. What they did for 2022 classifiers is they made a list of 5 or 6 stages, maybe even more than that. Where normally they have classifier shot at nationals, and then they distribute the classifier next year's from the previous nationals. Well, in 2022 they tried something which I wish they would do every year, where they sent out a list of 5 classifiers that everyone could shoot at any point. Well, for the provisional period, which I think was 3 months. Um, and so they posted these classifiers, and they said is, we're going to collect the data, and if we decide to keep the stage, we'll set the high hit factor after the provisional period, and then give you the scores. You will earn the scores for that provisional period at the end of the provisional period, right? So you won't get the scores immediately, but you'll get them later. Which I think is a fantastic idea, because what that does is then allows to be data driven, where we look at the data first, have everyone shoot it, look at the data, then set the high hit factor, and then go back and give everyone their scores, right? Versus, hey, we think it might be this. So we're like, so the counterexample is what they did with limited optics, right? They came out with limited optics, and they immediately went out and set high hit factors for limited optics for every stage before anyone ever shot it, right? And what we found out is it's way too high. Okay, and we all predicted this, but anyway, so there's two counterexamples where they did a fantastic idea of having everyone shoot the stages first and then doing the scores, which I think they should have done limited optics, where at the end of the provisional period, then going and looking back at all the scores for this year, 2023, or last year, and then rescoring everybody after setting high factor. But they didn't do that. So anyway, so 2203 was one of the stages that they rejected, and they rejected, I think, partially because I made a stink about it. But if you look at the scores here, the scores, if we scroll through all the divisions here, tab through them, yeah, look at all these graphs. So they look like they fit nice bell curves, but if you notice, they're different than all the bell curves we've looked at so far. And they're different how? They've got a really long tail that goes off to the right. Okay. So if you're just a data guy and don't know anything about the sport, that might not mean anything to you, right? We've got a good well matched bell curve. So what's the problem here, right? Um, well, the problem was setting the stage up in person. What we found, so 2204, it was a square shooting area, and there was two angled walls that came off the side of the square, and then there was a double stack behind the walls, double stack with a no shoot in each corner, and then the top corner the same thing, double stack no shoots. And the angle of those walls affected, you had to go all the way to this corner here to shoot the target that was back here. So the angle of that wall and the length really mattered how much of the target you could actually see and present. And at my
Okay.
club, we set it up, and we couldn't see the targets at all at how it was officially
Oh,
measured,
wow.
right? And we're like, okay, what's going on here? So
Ooh.
I took the measuring tape to the wall. Our wall, so the standard wall is 8 foot, right? Our wall
Right.
was 8 foot and 1 inch. So that 1 inch at that
Oh.
angle completely occluded the target. So we changed, like we had to like move the wall around in order to try to get the intended vision, which was we thought was kind of leaning around the corner slightly, and you could see the whole thing. And so it was basically like, wow, just a tiny difference in how you set up the stage or the dimensions of your stage props had massively affected the target presentation, right? And so this kind of like hit home the point to me of like, well, making like, first of all, one problem with classifiers, a lot of the classifiers, if you've ever set them up, they're not like where the targets are and walls are not very well defined, right? They're partially defined, how like, and so they're very hard to get consistent every time you set it up, get them exactly the same. But then a movement stage like that, where man, even the slightest dimension change on even with a well-dimensioned stage, a slightest change, even because you don't measure a 45-degree angle perfectly. No one's out there with a total station doing a survey to figure out the wall angles, and
Right.
so a slightest change in that and massively change the stage. So it kind of hit on the point to me of like, you really can't build complex stages and have it be a consistent classifier. And in my opinion, if classifier shot at one club is not the same as the same classifier shot at another club, then it's not a classifier. It shouldn't be a classifier, right? It's not an equal measure of skill because they're different stages. How shooters see them and engage them, right? So I know I pestered USPSA about it when and they were like at the end of the provisional period. I know they will never admit or would say it's because of the posts and stuff that I was doing, but you know, we can hope that it might have been. But they threw this one out. And they rejected this classifier just because, like I said, yeah, it's not a classifier if you can't consistently set up the stage.
Right.
Um,
Now,
yeah,
I just saw somewhere someone was mentioning how IPSC did away with the classification system altogether.
yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Um, so I think well, it's multifaceted here, right? I think classification. I think again, when we look at that national, even at the national performance, it's still reasonably stacked up. GMs beat M's beat A's, right? It reasonably stacked up like that. So
Right.
so it is a reasonable measure of performance, but it doesn't measure super squad like top guys, right? It doesn't measure them very accurately, and it's missing skill sets that it can't measure, right? So there's there are deficiencies here. I personally wouldn't mind if we didn't have classification at all, but especially since I help run several matches in my section, it's very clear that average shooters, a bunch of average shooters, really like classifiers, right? So that is a big selling point to new shooters is how do I measure up against the national standard, right? Because remember, I got into the sport. My dad said, if you think you're good at something, go and compete against people that are and find out. And so the
Right.
classification system, as limited or as many issues as it has, still is a way that attracts people to measure how do I stack up on the national stage. And and I'm sure I could go to I could go to a totally different state, different section, shoot their locals, and still perform pretty well. Similar performance to how I do at my locals. But if I go to a nationals event, I don't know how I'd stack up. I probably wouldn't stack up that well, especially since I've been more focused on running matches than my own personal performance lately, right? So I think there's still value. I think there is still value in it, as flawed as it is, and I think it is something that really attracts people to the sport, whether it be USPSA or whatever alternate comes about. If there's a classification system, people will like it and want to shoot them. Um, I'm also really partial to a skill rating system, which Jay Slater, if you've talked to him, I'm sure he's explained his rating system. But
Yes.
essentially, I've done my own test development of a system as well, where if you're familiar with chess or video games, and video games also does this, but in chess, they what they have is called an ELO rating system, and basically you how your match, your game finishes, how you win or lose or draw in chess against another player, you can earn or lose rating points. And if you're a high rated player and you play against a low rated player, you're expected to win, right? So
Right.
if say, like, if I was shooting against Niels and I beat Niels, he would lose a bunch of rating points and I would earn a bunch of rating points, right? If we were to have rating point system. And that would be purely on match or stage performance, right? So Jay
Kind of
does it
like
based on,
college football. Yeah.
yeah. um Video games, for people that play or are familiar with video games, which I'm sure nowadays is a good number of shooters. Um, like ranked modes in video games, they have under the covers, they have their own little rating system where it's the same thing. Like, you're expected to beat somebody that's worse than you, and you earn and earn your rating points to move up in rank or not. And both Jay and I, we have different methods, but basically both proven that this can be reasonably applied to competitive shooting, and it's more based on match performance. Like, Jay's looks at each individual stage, because it gives you more data if you look at every stage versus just the final match percentage. Um, Mine currently that I've tested looks at just match performance and how you rate. And, like, at least with I've done with my section, it reasonably accurately ranks everyone's skills within the section, to what at least we feel like intuitively is a correct ranking, I guess, if you will, of the shooters in our section. Um, so it is actually a
So
decent way to doing it, an alternate
so
maybe.
Kurt, do you have like software skills then too?
Yeah, so I can program in Python. So I do all my analytical programming in Python. And for my PhD research, I had to develop the sensor system as well as all the analytics for neural networks. Yeah,
Okay. Goodness. You've got quite
yeah,
the array of skills.
yeah. I'm
Now,
a
do
jack
you
of all
do you
trades.
use AI with any of this stuff that you're doing with practical shooting?
No, no, I have not, because so AI is it's the voodoo of it can do everything, but it can do nothing. Um,
Voodoo, I like it.
Yeah, AI, there's a lot of misconceptions with AI. There could be places to use AI in competitive shooting, but I just haven't really found them, to be honest. And
I want to
and
find a way to use it to virtually shoot my classifiers. That's all I'm saying.
yeah, right. Like, I've talked to Derek at Practical Shooting Insights, and he was going to do an AI system where on practice score, where you could the AI would look at all the practice score data, and it could figure out which shooter was who was who, right? So, like, and if you've ever dealt with practice score, every time you register for a match, you put your name and USPSA number, email, stuff like that. But you can input whatever you want, right? And no one's there to correct you except
Yeah.
for maybe your USPSA number when the match director uploads it to USPSA. And so there is a place for AI there where you could say have AI look at say a set of matches and say, well, this person is all of these particular scores, even if they're named wrong or different USPSA numbers, right? Like there's ways that AI could do something like that. Now I don't think he did develop it because it just sometimes with AI it's like, do you really need to? Like sometimes
Right.
with data is like you spend all this time programming something you don't actually need. Um, it's very true with software often case, um, but yeah, so there is room for that. But yeah, I don't I haven't found anything that I want to spend the time to develop AI for in practical
Okay.
shooting.
But the software you've created for your local stuff, your ELO ratings,
Yeah,
you've been able to tweak it to the point where it's accurate in rating all the local shooters.
yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Um,
Interesting.
Now I've looked at trying to expand that to nationally, and what it comes down to is essentially needing the computing power and server space to have something that could make a rating system that's available to the public and automatically download stuff, and that like to me was like, well, both too much effort than I can afford to do, as well as just the cost expense of running a server
A server.
is not like I said. I'm a PhD student. I'm not a professional yet, so I don't have the money
You're not
to pay for
Dr.
something like
Kirt
that.
McKenna yet.
Not yet. Yeah.
Okay. Now
Um,
I wanted, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry. Yeah. So yeah, and Jay Slater, he has done the same with a very similar system, looking at majors, and his rating system from majors turns out to be really accurate too, in a
Hmm.
reasonable predictor of performance. Now, obviously, you can't predict the future, so things always change, right? But it is reasonable at predicting performance, as well as like if you had a classification system where say like GM means you were this skill and higher, right? Then that would actually be a reasonable way of doing it, and that wouldn't have you wouldn't have to do classifiers at all.
Yeah, I think the only issues that really come into play here to skew the data would be your Joey Sauerlands, who in a year time frame go from Joe Schmo to you know top three at nationals, and also your issues like again, I hate using JJ as an example, but JJ having the issue with the gun,
Right.
those are the only things you can't predict,
Right. Right.
so
Right.
otherwise I feel like it's what Jay is doing with his is very very accurate,
Yeah.
but
And
but it's that
and a
human factor.
right. And then there's another potential pitfall if you were to do that on a local level is like the siloing effect, right? So all the local shooters in my section here in Colorado, right? Like we might have our own ranking and scores, but then all the local shooters over in Arizona might have their own ranking, and so say like a 1500 from Colorado may not be the same as a 1500 from Colorado or from Arizona because there's not a lot of like crossbreeding and not a lot of shooters shooting against each other from the different states. So like there is that potential issue as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to talk also because you also did some other stuff which
Uh,
I thought was very interesting.
yeah.
Now this is activity by state that you had created,
Yeah.
which I find very interesting. And I saw that you had created a similar map, but
Yeah.
I don't know if you use Flourish or who you use, but at least this way I can go in and we can see the numbers.
Yeah. Yeah.
If
Yeah.
it's actually
Yeah.
interactive. Um,
Yeah.
but I found this very, very interesting
Hmm.
where obviously California was the most active state in the country with over 21,000 matches in 2022. Now, I assume these are matches that had a classifier. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it was 21,000 classifier scores in 2022.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, not matches.
Okay.
Yeah.
21,000 classifier scores. All right.
Yep.
So California, then Texas, and then I think it's Arizona. Yeah, Arizona followed by Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Okay. But I also found it interesting that while you had a few in here that had some higher, like your state, Colorado,
Yeah.
Washington wasn't bad. That was pretty good too.
Yeah.
But then, there's a lot of states mixed in there
Right.
that don't have very many numbers. And then you come over to the East Coast, like actually New York shocked me with 7,000 classifier scores for 2022.
Right.
I Because of the gun laws, I would not have expected that, but
Yeah.
I was wrong. But there's a lot more on the eastern half of the country that have a bunch of scores than on the other. Now, I noticed someone had asked you if you were going to do all of the matches, but it sounds like that would be a very time consuming prospect.
Um yeah, so at least at the time. So I've been doing a lot of this kind of in my spare time, and if you notice, I haven't been posting a whole lot lately cuz been both busy personally as well as uh kind of just fed up with USPSA in some regards, so I haven't been
Okay.
as interested in posting. But so let me how I got the data. So what I did is I wrote a script that went to USPSA.org, their match results. So their published match results that everyone can go and look at, right? So I didn't hack their database, didn't do anything like that. I just looked to the web page, and each web page that had scores, I grabbed them. And it is time consuming in terms of like the bot that goes through and does that. And then uh my first pass, the first pass I've done, I've only grabbed classifier scores because the data adds up and gets big really quick. So I only wanted to grab classifier scores. So that's why I've been like posting like stuff like this is on a per classifier basis, rather than on a per match basis. And with this one in particular, how I got the states is I looked at the match, looked at the classifier score, and which club that the score the match was at, right? And then I also looked at the USPSA's, went through all of their clubs and recorded all of their clubs and like all the official affiliated clubs. And when I did, when I made this post with March of 23, so I went in March, and who were all the affiliated clubs in March, and grabbed all of and like recorded them, and then correlated which match from which state shot which how many classifiers, right? um so that's how I came up with this plot and this data. And so to do it for every single match, it would be it's a little bit more complicated. Got to record everything rather than just
Right.
classifiers. As well as since then, USPSA their IT team has added a like kind of an anti-bot measure. So my script crawler no longer works in USPSA, but I've gone to Practice Score and done the same thing on Practice Score. And Practice Score takes even more time, because a lot more than USPSA matches are shot and recorded on Practice Score.
Right.
And like there's no data verification on Practice Score. So like if someone who's, I don't know, shooting NRL 22 posts that it accidentally presses USPSA when they select the match type and upload it that way, then like I got to go through and sort through their scores and make sure, is this actually a USPSA match. So just technically it's more difficult, as well as just data wise. Just more data. And I just haven't done that, and I found like at least in 2022, a lot of clubs are shooting classifiers pretty regularly. I know that's changing. I know like in my state in 2023, that certainly changed, where we clubs started shooting less classifiers, like starting to shoot only the minimum requirement. Um, for various reasons. And I know 2024, especially with all the protests going on, there's going to be even less uh, classifiers. So like, if I were to do this again, I'd probably um, get it from practice score and just do every match, not just classifier matches. So, and that's just, yeah. Again, it's the reason why I haven't been posting is like part of it's just been busy, man. Trying to graduate. My wife wants me to graduate.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I get that. I mean, I'm sure your wife wants you to move on to the next phase
yeah,
post school.
yeah.
Now, what
But
program did
yeah,
you use to create your? And just I'll pull this up so other people can
yeah,
see what I'm talking about. Like this is what you had
yeah.
posted, and what
Um,
program do you use?
so I use Python pretty
Okay,
exclusively, and I don't remember which package in particular, but I think they're. It's not like all my plots normally are from Matplotlib package in Python, and this was I think something else that does state mapping. Um,
okay,
that can do mapping, and so yeah, so basically all programmed it all myself using these open source libraries.
gotcha.
Um, whereas like you, it looks like yeah, you uploaded actually yeah some decent plotting tool that you got there.
Yeah, Flourish actually they're designed exactly for this. Like you can do political data, you can do population data, you could do disease data. You can break it down by county. I mean, it gets crazy. It took me a little while just to figure out how to do this. Um, but it's interesting how with the last map,
Mm-hmm.
California was far and ahead
Mm-hmm.
of everybody else. But in this case, because there's more animals in Montana than people.
Yeah,
The per capita is actually the highest number of classifier scores, which is pretty funny, actually.
yeah, yeah, definitely. But you can see, like I pointed out in the post too. The interesting thing is, like my state makes top 15 either way. We're definitely not top 15 in population, and then Arizona makes top 5 either way as well. But you see that definitely
Right.
the more rural states have more activity per capita, kind of makes sense, right? More people interested in guns, more rural, but not like totally rural either. And we're going out to shoot. And like Arizona, I wouldn't call a rural state, and they like shooting. They're really good at shooting down there.
Yeah, but the thing that I find interesting is like the it flipped. Like there were a few
Yeah,
states in the activity by state out west, and most of them were east, and now most of them are west with a few east.
yeah.
So
So
you have to go to like West Virginia and Maine are higher, but
yeah,
they also have fewer clubs and population. So it's very interesting.
yeah. And I lived in Texas for a few years. So well, look, Alaska's pretty popular, high too. But anyway, so I lived in Alaska
Yeah.
or Texas for a little while, and I did an internship in down in Texas down in 2018, and this was after I started shooting. So I brought all my equipment down there, like ready to go do some matches, and I was in Houston. At least at the time, like they were very uncoordinated compared to my section in Colorado, and there was like so few and far between matches, and I was like really shocked that Texas didn't shoot a lot. And then I did this post, and Texas, at least in total numbers, is really high. But when you look at per capita, it's, I don't know, middle of the pack kind of. And so it's yeah, kind of okay. It's like, okay, that makes sense. There's a lot of people, and those people shoot their matches regularly, but there's not a lot of matches per capita, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like in California, if you look at the actual clubs, like most of them are Northern California. There's like a handful of clubs in the LA area, but yeah, almost all the activities in Northern California.
That would be interesting too if there was a way to break it down by club. You know what I mean? So location within that
Yeah, I
map. That would be
think.
interesting.
Let's see. I think I have area code. So I could feasibly try to do it by a handful of area codes, but that, yeah, at the moment is seems like more work than I'm interested in doing at the moment.
Right.
But I do have the area code information, so I could feasibly do the same plot by area code, or like
Well, look, if you ever
parts
need
of states.
help putting this stuff out in some form or another, let me know. I'd be willing to help you. Ooh,
Yeah.
that's not right.
And I could get 2023 data. So yeah, that something I could do. We could do for 2023 is I could download the data and somehow get that to you, repost it, and do something interesting with it. But
Okay. I mean,
see
even if you
how
just
it's
do
changed.
what you've been doing, like with your
Yeah,
information on Google Sheets, you could always just post it there and send me a link.
yeah, yeah. That's
So
true.
it's very interesting. That is for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And at least again, like I was surprised about California and Texas. In a way because I figured that they weren't so interested in shooting that much. Um, but turns out,
Now,
obviously, because they're big states, big populations, that they do. Yeah,
yeah, right. Yeah. Even California, I mean, as far ahead as they were of everybody in the total number of classifiers, they're what, maybe a little above middle of the pack,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. Oh, that also reminds me. So there used to be an argument against raising production to 15 um, because of mag ban states. And the
Right.
funny thing is, if you look at all of the mag ban states, they have high USPSA activity. And let me tell you, they're not shooting 10-round max. They're shooting full capacity. So I think
Yeah.
the capacity arguments in terms of and Colorado included, no one cares about capacity, and law enforcement doesn't enforce it. No one cares. So like I know I understand the drama and I understand why that was bad, but at the same time, USPSA was kind of correct in terms of literally nobody enforces it here, and that's true with almost every state except for probably New York and New Jersey, in terms of
Yeah.
enforcement of mag capacities. Um, but in terms of at matches, certainly, as far as I know, New York is the only state that matches do enforce 10-round max, that I'm aware of. I'm sure other states do, but you think like states like California, Colorado, obviously because of the cameo uh, controversy, Washington State, like all those clubs are letting their shooters shoot max capacity. We're not requiring people to conform to the state law. Um, and that's, I mean, multiple reasons. One is a match director. I'm not a law enforcement officer, so I'm not going to enforce that law on you. But I know, like in the case of like Cameo in Colorado, I think USPSA was in the wrong, right? Because they basically went out and said, "Hey, we know this is the law, and but it's okay if you break it," because they say they're not going to enforce it, right? And so there's the draw. Like
Right.
I think that's bad. That's really bad
I do
policy,
too.
right?
It is. Yeah.
Because all you need is to annoy some state government officials, and suddenly the state patrol is out there enforcing it, right? Even though they would
Right.
never
Somebody
enforce it
other
in
than the
any other
local
match.
sheriff. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I just think it's bad optics in general as an
yeah,
organization to promote something like that,
right.
As much as I would love to shoot at Cameo,
Yeah,
and I think it would be a great place to hold nationals
yeah,
just because there are so many other options. The way that thing is wired for sound, there are so many things you could do
yeah,
media wise. It could be super, super fun. But
yeah,
I think until we get to that point where magazine capacity is not an issue, we just have to
right.
play it safe,
Yeah, and
unfortunately.
I believe our mag capacity ban is currently within the district court. I think. Um, and we had a former USPSA shooter testify at that, and from what I've read from the testimony, he did a very terrible job that made shooting look bad. So yeah, unfortunately.
And this is what got me when I was creating this map.
Yeah.
You have Illinois, very big anti gun, and Indiana right beside them. So they're right beside each other.
Hmm.
And Indiana's pro gun, pro Second Amendment. And you have more than twice as much participation in Illinois as you do in Indiana. Just
Yep.
nuts to me.
Right. Right. And well, I think part of that is I want to say Wisconsin is pretty active. There's a lot of good shooters in Wisconsin, and there's a lot of clubs just over the border in Illinois. So I think in that like lower Wisconsin area and upper Illinois, I think there's just both obviously with Chicago, but I think there's just a lot of people that shoot matches in that region, and so I think there's a lot of overlap, interstate overlap, potentially
Okay. So they
of
just
people that go to
go
matches.
up
Yeah,
into Wisconsin and shoot there where
yeah, or
they
vice
could
versa.
literally
Yeah.
be safe in shooting full mags, right?
Well, or vice
And
versa.
and
You know,
come
people from
down, right.
Wisconsin coming down. Yeah. Um, so yeah, there are a handful of clubs. I remember when I was going through the list that are kind of like in that region where they're all about maybe an hour away from each other. Um, which at least in my section around Denver, any club that's within 2 hours is like everyone goes to it. So
I got you.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
I also thought since we were talking about the USPSA stuff, I'm going to go back
yeah,
to. Now, here's one that we could drum up a little controversy on. You said a very rough estimate of revenue from classifiers and match fees being 560K in
yeah,
2022.
yeah,
Now, I thought when I saw that, I thought the interesting thing here would be taking that money, and I think you could really, it would be interesting to take that just as a rough estimate, that and then take all your 2022 data for nationals, all the money you brought in for sponsorships, um, match fees, that type of thing, versus all of your expenses for those things. Put in your 560, see what the difference is. And then let's just say for 2024, a guesstimate would be you take that same data for 2023. You determine that.
hmm
Let's say it's the same 560 just for argument's sake, and then all your cost for your nationals, and then roll that into one nationals. Compare it to this would be our cost if we did a 5-day Monday through Friday match where you shoot 4 out of the 5 days. At the end of Friday, then the whole thing's over. But what would be the cost of something like that, or a 4-day match, compared to running 3 or 4 different nationals, and
hmm
look at that bottom line? I think that would be very interesting because I personally and several people I've spoken to think that's the way to go to reduce that number at the bottom being a negative number.
Yeah, I'm personally a fan or advocate of saying, instead of say doing 3 or 4 nationals, doing 1 or 2 and making them a day or two longer to accommodate more shooters, right? And
Yes.
more divisions. I think that's the way to do it, because I'm sure it's rolling 2 nationals into one is going to be cheaper than hosting 2 nationals. I think that would be a better way of doing it. The only complaint, or the only opposition to that I've heard, is people going, well, if say production is on day 1 through 3 and everything else, and then day 6 is awards, the people that want to stay around for awards from production got to stay around an extra 3 days or whatever, and so they got to spend that money, and it's like, too bad, in my opinion. Like, I'm sorry that the like if you want to stay around for awards, then do that. If not, then we can figure out ways to still recognize the people, even if they don't stick around for the whole week that the event is. Like, yeah. But that's the only thing I've heard of people that the opposition to rolling multiple events into one. Um, Now, as far as like actual budget goes, like I'm sure I could make some estimates, but we could easily come up with. We know how much nationals cost, right? How much the fee is to enter, right? So we could come up with a gross revenue pretty easily for how much nationals makes.
Right.
But I've
I agree with that.
yeah, but I've heard as far as how much it costs, the USPSA keeps it pretty close at hand. Obviously, they don't announce it on
Right.
a per match basis, and I've also heard that they don't even have a formal budget for a single event. They just throw it, and then whatever the final cost is the final cost, which to me is like mind blowing, right? And I know I've heard of other majors, even smaller majors like level twos, where match directors will do the same thing, and they'll just say, "Hey, it's $150," and then they blow out their budget, and then suddenly they're in $10,000 of debt just to throw the match. Like I've heard of that being unfortunate common circumstance, where it's like, to me, again, that blows my mind. I would think if I'm going to put on a major
Yeah.
event, I'm going to like get all my numbers figured out, and then we're going to price it based on staying at least net zero, right? Stay like trying to
Yeah.
break even. So to me, it blows my mind that they made it, an additional $500,000 on classifiers alone, and they still were over budget and went into $500,000 worth of debt in 2022. So like, what are they spending money on at nationals, right? Like to me, the numbers are crazy.
Well, and aren't the classifiers and match fees supposed to go towards nationals? I mean, that's what I thought.
Uh,
So,
I
I
just
mean, but one of the
maybe.
things I just had oh my gosh, it must have been I think it was a 2 hour conversation with someone. I don't even want to hint at who it is because I don't want that getting out. But
Hmm,
he said the exact same thing. They're basically treating it like they have an open checkbook. So they don't care what the expense is. But I do feel you need to start with at least a rough estimate of this is what our income is going to be. This is what the cost is going to be. Here's the bottom line. How can we adjust that? So look, I know it's not a money maker.
right,
You know, they're probably going to go into the red. But like we just said, if you have three or four of them and it's 500,000 in the red, and we do one and it's $50,000 in the red, well, that's a heck of a lot better than the
right,
alternative.
right.
So
And unfortunately, USPSA is not a national government, so we they
can't just print
as
money.
an right as an organization, they physically cannot operate in the red year over year, right? Like that,
Right.
they can't just go into debt, because eventually who's going to give the org money to put on events, like,
Yeah.
and the area directors self financing the org? If they are, like, that's retarded, but I don't think they are. It just, where's the money coming from? And eventually, if there is some sort of bank account paying for this, is that's going to run dry, right? So like, it's got to be, the whole org's got to be positive on average over time. Otherwise, it's fundamentally gonna die. Like, it's, economics. You
Right.
can't go into debt infinitely, unlike the U.S. government.
Right. Now, I noticed that PSL is or PCSL is coming out with a classifier system. Did you help with that at all?
I will be helping them with some of the data analytics. So I've
Okay.
got some of the I've got the data from them, from I guess the two matches where they've had classifiers. So yeah, we'll be posting my analysis of them here in the coming days and weeks, probably sooner than later. Um, and one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually look at USPSA, like national events that have new classifiers, like how the national scores compare um, against the full bell curve after 5 years, right? So like, basically to come up with a relative number of, like, say, everyone at nationals is shooting conservatively, because they want to win the match, hopefully, and not zero or heroing this potential classifier, right? So
Right.
so what I want to do is look at like how does the top guy shooting conservatively compare against 5 years worth of data of everyone zero or heroing it, and use that as like a here's a recommended like initial high hit factor from the national scores from the PCSL event. And then I've been also working with them as like, hey, like we need to come up with some very well defined, repeatable, consistent way of setting high hit factor. And Max and I think Marcel is helping Max as well. Max Leo Grandis. We talked a little bit, and they're like, yeah, like we need to come up with a defined way. Well, Max will decide what it is. But so I'm gonna make some recommendations of like, here's what I think hit factor should be initially until there's enough data to set up a consistent high hit factor methodology. And I like personally recommend, I like that 1% GM, that top 1% equals GM. And I think he's currently thinking of a similar like high hit factor classification system. And I floated the idea of the rating skill, and I think Max isn't super interested in the rating skill system just because of the siloing between sections. Like if there's not enough people shooting against each other in other states, then the rating system could go wrong. So he's interested in the classifier, like traditional classifiers. But yeah, I'll be working with them to help him come up with a way to set high hit factor.
Okay. And what do you have? What do you have set for 2024? Anything other than finishing your PhD?
Finishing my PhD. So I help run 5 matches locally.
Oh
So
wow.
one thing, yeah, I've overcommitted myself, but hey, man, I like shooting, right? So
Nothing wrong with that.
so I want to run like my goal helping run matches or as match director is like to run matches that people want to come back and shoot, right? And not just like fun matches, but also like challenging high skill matches that people want to come back and shoot. So I do that. So I run also not so I run USPSA matches as well as I run a tactical rifle match where uh, we basically do the same thing but with AR-15s. So we've got our tactical rifle match. It's similar to PCSL. At least we're actually using PCSL rules, but it's a one gun rifle only match where we've got stages that are kind of like traditional USPSA stages where they're in close quarters type stages, and we've got our range. We have berm out to 400 yards, so we do a couple stages where it's like 0 to 400 yards shooting, and they're kind of more positional shooting against steel targets. And hey, like it's fun. You get to go be good with an AR-15 and not just rage blast at close distance, which is also fun too. So I run that match with another guy. We're co-match track that, and it's a lot of fun. And like I said, we use PCSL rules, and we actually add an addendum to that. We added a couple extra divisions, as well as I wrote my own rule book too, called the American Practical Shooting League. I know some of you guys may have seen that.
Oh, I have
Yep.
seen that. I didn't know who that was. That's
Yeah,
you.
that's me. So
Oh,
I wrote that,
okay.
and the main motivation for that originally was I wanted a rule book for that tactical rifle match because we didn't have one formally. We were just like, yeah, we're USPSA safety rules, but we have our own divisions. So I wrote that, um, and we merged the rifle divisions with PCSL. So we're basically PCSL plus 2 divisions. And yeah, so I wrote that, and then the other, I also wrote some pistol rules too, pistol divisions, which
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of, and I'm also trying to convince Max to maybe incorporate some of my ideas into PCSL. Um, um, and part of, yeah, the other reason for that is pistol wise, like if we're going to shoot outlaw pistol, is a lot of the USPSA divisions, in my opinion, don't make any sense. They're kind of arbitrary, especially with the new edition of limited optics. Is and I even have data on limited optics from this year, which we can talk a little bit about too. Um, but limited optics is, in my opinion, identical to carry optics, right? So carry optics, if we dial back time, right? It's kind of based on production, and over time, we've adjusted carry optics rules where it's basically a pseudo race gun, right? Like my Shadow 2 and the trigger kit I have in my Shadow 2 in single action is just as good as most 2011s and even some of the best 2011s. Like I have a friend who has an Atlas Athena, and he says my single action trigger is the same as his Atlas Athena, but it's a joke. So
Oh,
his
wow.
Atlas Athena can't be in carry optics, but my Shadow 2 can be, right?
Right.
And even though like they're almost identical, so to me, I think it's silly. Looking at the scores from this year too for limited optics on average is only zero point 0.1 hit factor better than carry optics, which is arbitrary to me. It's throw it out, it's the same. 0.1 is no real difference. But yeah, so I see you got
Hmm.
the divisions here posted, and so our thought is, and I've worked with some top 25 shooters in open and limited, and I've talked to them like, hey, if you are shooting minor scoring only, right? So minor scoring only, is your tricked out 2011 race gun, can you shoot that any better in minor only with minor power factor ammo than a Shadow 2 that's tuned? And the answer tends to be kind of no. Like, sorry, they're about the same. There's no real major
Okay.
advantage with a comp when you're shooting minor power factor ammo. They're about equivalent. And so what I did is basically we've got iron sight division and an optics division. And essentially, and I've even changed it since a little bit since then. I need to actually post the rule book or a link to the current rule book. But in optics, it's and in irons, it's compensators, barrel ports, all that stuff's allowed. Mag capacity is allowed. So we just got an iron division and an optics division. And for mag capacity, what I wanted to do, and what the group of us wanted to do, is make it not make divisions make more sense on how you compete with them rather than gear specific things. So in mag capacity, we say there's no mag limits. However, for stages that require 20 or more shots, you must make a mandatory reload between your first shot and your last shot. Right. So now,
Okay.
if you run a factory 21 round mag, or if you run 170 millimeter mag, whatever, right? Like it's you got to make a reload at some point in there. Um, and so that the thought was is like now it's based on you as the shooter deciding when and where to make your reload rather than forced you based on a division gear requirement, right? And so that way it's more focused on the competition aspect of shooting rather than the skill side of shooting rather than the gear itself. Um,
But you could definitely game it because I do have a brass +9 base pad from Taylor Freelance that would now allow me to get like 27 rounds in my mag
yeah,
plus one in the chamber. Now I have a wider variety of when I can change mags. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
So now I can do it while I'm moving
yeah,
versus, only having 20 plus one or 22 plus one or whatever. And, really having to fine tune it more.
yeah,
So I like
exactly.
it.
So we make it where you can decide when you want to do that, and as well as like, hey, if you want to run a 50 round drum in your pistol, you can. You just got to reload at some point. And anyone who's ever
Oh,
run a drum and a pistol realizes that's really dumb because all that weight and mass just makes the
that's
gun handle
hilarious.
worse, right? So like you could, but it's not a good idea, right?
I want to see you
So it
holster
allows
it.
you exactly. Um, so I also put suppressors allowed, at least for the moment, in my
I
opinion,
saw that.
with supersonic ammo and as long as you have a safe holster, right, I think a lot of modern timers can pick up supersonic suppressed ammo.
Mm,
And
okay.
and in my experience as a match director with our timers, we can, right? Like I've been able to easily pick up shot times as long as the RO is correct and in the right spot, can pick up shot times even from an MP5, right? The
Well,
suppressed ammo.
and the sensitivity is set right. Yeah.
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 So I think it's doable. So I think as a Second Amendment guy, like why artificially restrict suppressors, right? Like if you as a match director want to allow it and put in the effort to do uh to allow to tune your timers and make sure everyone's timing correctly, then why not? It's competitively, a suppressor does not make you competitive. Anyone who's ever shot a suppressor and a pistol will know it makes the shooting worse. Uh, but it's cool, and we can do it because we're American.
Now, I
Yeah,
thought this was interesting. So you did a classic. Is this for like your single stack, that type of thing,
yeah,
or
yeah,
revolver, so that it makes it a little? They get
yeah.
their
So
division.
yeah. So that was the intent with classic is if guys that want to like normally shoot production want to stay with tens, or single stack guys want to show up and they don't want to compete against guys with 30 round sticks, or the revolver guys want to shoot the match, you can still do it. And my thing too is like, hey, do whatever you want to the gun, optics, irons, whatever, just 10 round max. And I've even thought about a lightweight division, which I haven't posted that, but a lightweight division where same thing, do whatever you want to your gun, optics, irons, magwell, no magwell, whatever. However, the only requirement is the unloaded gun without a magazine has to be less than 32 ounces, right? So then you can kind of min max and play around with how you want your gun set up, um,
So if
as
you
well as
wanted to,
yeah,
if you carry a compact gun and you wanted to shoot that in competition, that would be that
yeah,
category.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, so I've like I said, I've written rule book. It's kind of in a provisional state, and I'm working with Max Leo Grandis and his team, you know, maybe to incorporate some of my ideas in the PCSL. But yeah, I think there's potential here in this alternative version of the sport.
Interesting. So I assume then with the updated rules that with comps being allowed in the optics pistol division, then your open guns would fit there.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And it could be a matter of like, so I know like some people might not like that concept, and could be a matter of like if this were to actually grow, which I doubt it will, but if it were to actually grow, like that's obvious that we need a separate open gun division. Like we could do that, like move it and make them their own traditional open division. So
Yeah, because I mean, I could see where, I mean, even with a limited optics gun, you're not going to. I guess you could put a comp on it, though. You could put a comp on anything you wanted. So even carry optics guns can take a comp. So you could really flatten it out.
yeah, and I've within the rule book too is there's only minor scoring, so there's no major scoring at all.
Oh, I really like that.
Yeah, and
Because me,
yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I'm sorry. Well, I was just going to say that I feel like the I know why they do major scoring. I get
Mhm.
it, makes perfect sense. But I also feel like, in a way, while you're incentivizing speed, you're rewarding slop at times because you can get deltas and still get an extra point in there. And I don't mean tight deltas either. You can just be loose
Yeah,
and I'm me coming from more of an accuracy background. I hate seeing that kind of. I feel like if you want to give him an extra point for a Charlie, I'm down with that.
yeah,
But maybe keep deltas the same
yeah,
because we shouldn't be rewarding deltas.
yeah, yeah. No, I agree with you. I think yeah, that I'm a fan of minor scoring, just because it's rewards accuracy over pure pay and spray, and I think that's what practical shooting is about anyway, right? Is fast. Like we do, like speed
But
isn't
accurate.
super important, but accuracy at speed is what
Yep.
really wins the day, and I think we should value that in our sport too. So I'm a fan of minor only, and so like having the race gun in that, like, right, as long as we're minor only, like there's less of a difference than people want to admit. I think the biggest difference in open really is the major power factor scoring and a frame mounted optic, as well as just mag size too. But like those, I think, are the biggest reasons why open is so much faster and better than higher scoring than other divisions, is purely that major power factor, or
Okay.
very considerably the major power factor itself. So,
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
but
But with
as
the
we,
but
sorry,
with the
as
comp, it makes it
yeah,
feel like a light 9. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah, I'm with you.
yeah.
What were we going to say before I
Uh,
so rudely interrupted?
sorry. So I was gonna say as we've seen in USPSA, is kind of open is dying in general, and I think there's multiple reasons for that. I think the simplest reason is they're expensive, and a lot of people locally don't want to invest in expensive guns. Um, the other reason I think is because of carry optics and now limited optics too. Is you can shoot more affordably incredibly good guns without buying a $10,000 gun and then worrying about reloading for to feed the gun.
Right.
And so I think those two factors are just like open's kind of dying anyway. So do we really need a special division for open if nobody's really shooting open as much anymore? Um,
Right. And if you look at the numbers, like I did have Jake and Rick on in December,
mhm.
and that was one of the things we talked about was the participation numbers. And if you add limited optics and carry optics, it is 50% of all participation.
Yeah, yeah,
So they are taking over the sport.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and uh, in one of my posts too, like I have just over time, every year after year, you can see like carry optics just absolutely growing and dominating the sport. Um,
Yeah. Let me
yeah,
go back to uh, let me go back to your page here real quick.
yeah,
Like everybody's going to see our messages. All right.
yeah.
Oh boy. I guess it's down a little bit.
Right, right there, right, the bar chart right in the middle.
This one?
Yeah, yeah. So this,
Ah, okay. I see what you did. Yeah.
yeah, this is breakdown by division, by activity, and then also by classification. So and you see, so
Right.
that's 2018. You see the iron sight divisions are dominating. Limited in production was big back then,
Mm-hmm.
and every year after that, if you click over to each slide, it's like carry optics progressively gets more and more dominant.
Yep. And there it goes. There it goes. There it
Yeah,
goes.
and if
Yeah.
I were to update this to include limited optics, I'm sure it'd be even, like you said, 50%, and it'd be even greater.
Right. Same thing you were saying in
Yeah.
2018, it was only 10%. Then 16, 23, 30, 36, 41.
Hmm.
And I added, let me see. I thought I had, this must be the one without the limited optics
Mm.
added in, but limited optics ended up being like 8 to 10% for
Yeah.
the year. So,
So 50%. Yeah.
yeah. And you can see where like limited 10 has in the last 5 years has never been anything. So
Right.
I don't even know why that's an argument to keep it.
I agree.
Um, Revolvers changed a little bit. Single stacks dipped in half. PCC has stayed the same. It peaked at, at about 12.5%, almost
Yeah.
13. But yeah, production's gone from almost 22% to 6. So
Yeah.
it's seen a huge hit.
Yeah.
Limited, same thing, 26 to
Yeah.
11. So yeah, those iron sights divisions are not not going to last long at this point,
Yeah.
participation wise. Anyway, whoop, there
Right.
we go.
So yeah, it's so I yeah, so I can see. I assume part of the reason why they came up with limited optics is to not have 50-60% of shooters in one division, which okay, I think there's an argument for that. But like to me, the technical differences between limited optics and carry optics is so tiny, and the performance margin between them are also so tiny that I think it's silly to prevent 2011s from being in carry optics. Um, but I think if they were to re-change the rules to where carry optics was much closer to production optics in IPSC,
Yeah,
where there's more restrictions on what you can do to the gun, then I think there
yeah,
might be some room for some differences where, or maybe even 15 round capacity where, you know, production carry optics should be a, in theory, close to your carry gun, which, come on, how many of us are shooting our carry gun or similar to our carry gun and carry optics? And it's like no one. So if we wanted to have a division that's close to a factory carry op, a carry gun, then carry optics isn't it right now. And so like if I could see the argument of limited optics if carry optics was closer to that, but it's not. It's carry optics and limited optics are virtually identical right now, and so it's yeah,
yeah,
it's silly to me.
yeah. They definitely need to either combine them or differentiate them better.
Yeah,
So
yeah, right. But I think either way, a lot of people I think in 2024 are gonna like limited optics is gonna grow. And I think in general, a lot of like within the current group in USPSA, the average shooter, I think a lot of people like shooting the same division as each other, right? Because you're more competitive, like just to compete against people in your same division. Like I think there's more interest in that today than there were maybe even 5 years ago. Like more people wanted to shoot their gun, and now I think there might be more interest in people wanting to shoot against the good people. Like whatever the heat is locally, I think the majority of people want to shoot against that heat. And so I think like if top guys move to limited optics, I think a lot of people are going to start shooting limited optics for the same reason.
yeah, I can't disagree with you there. So
Yeah,
everybody will go where the heat is, and or in this case, the whatever the optic division is, because
yeah,
optics are just growing. Because I mean, 5 years ago, nobody put optics on their guns; they were too
right,
unreliable, or their carry guns. I mean, or
yeah,
whatever, state a reason why. But now it's
right.
like everybody's doing it.
Right. And I remember that there used to be the logic of like optics are harder to learn, or you're not as good with them, or they're
Right?
lower
They're
skill,
slow.
or whatever
Yeah,
it may be. That I think has just been proved out by competition shooting that like no, optics are actually good.
yeah.
Yeah.
Even an IDPA, same thing. It's
Yeah.
showing that optics are the future. So,
Yeah. So yeah, but yeah, I think if they made limited optics because they wanted to split up carry optics, I think that was a silly decision. If they wanted to made limited optics because they wanted 2011s, I think that's also a silly decision because they could have just allowed carry 2011s and carry optics, right? So that who knows why they made that decision, but we can now shoot these type of guns in a similar division. So I think that's where people
right.
are going to go. So
I do like that they made it a provisional one. So at least, they're capturing the data. Now you can actually make an educated decision as to what to do with it. And if the classifier data is showing that there's really no difference between carry optics and limited optics, well then maybe you just open, you either keep limited optics and you migrate there, or you just open up the rules for carry optics and include the 2011s.
yeah, and so for the classifiers that I have looked at, which I've only looked at a couple of them, um, it does look like the difference between limited optics and carry optics is marginal at best, in terms of pure performance numbers. So I think, yeah, I think they should be merged one way or another. Um,
Okay. So no reason unless we talked about like a production optics.
yeah,
If you don't keep carry optics and limited optics, but if you're going to create a production optics and some other, maybe that's where you make the determination of product. You change carry optics to production optics and keep limited optics, however you want to do it. But
yeah, yeah. Like I think, especially now that they're gonna allegedly gonna change production to 15 round capacity, like I think it would make sense to turn carry optics into 15 round capacity. Um, now that limited optics exists. So
okay, yeah, I think that would be the way to do it. So
yeah, yeah. So that way, like, because I've also thought about like a tiered system for guns kind of makes sense too, of like you've got your factory guns, and then like the next level up, which is kind of like your Shadow 2, tricked out Shadow 2. Like there's that level of gun, and then next level up, you've got your super tricked out guns like open guns. So we used to have that concept with production limited and then open, um, of that like three-tiered type system, and now we've kind of with how production or how carry optics and limited exists, we don't like, and limited optics and so on, is like we no longer have that tiered concept at play, um, anymore, in practice. So
and that's a good point. I don't think I've really heard anybody mention that tiered system, but yeah, you're right.
yeah, that's
You
like, I
if
feel like
you
that's the way it used to be, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and if you bring carry optics down to production optics, then you have limited optics and open. Then you
yeah,
do have that tiered system once again.
yeah.
It's a good
um
idea.
And I've heard in other sports like car racing, and I've seen like NRL 22 is actually a great example of this. Is the way they have their divisions. So I haven't looked super closely. So yeah, I don't have it memorized since I don't shoot the sport, but I've looked at it, and the way their system works is it's kind of like a tiered system, and but it's based on like the MSRP of your equipment, right? So for example, like if say we were to say carry optics, let's say the MSRP of the gun optic, and of the gun plus the optic, if we set a like $2,000 limit, right? And now everything under, anything that's less than $2,000 can be shot in carry optics, right? That at that point that precludes your atlases and your other 2011s that are really nice, right? um
Right.
and so you could, like, that could be a way of doing it, and NRL 22 does it, with their rifle divisions, is really just financial based, and that would be really, the only difficult thing is that'd be hard to like evaluate, at the gear check, is you got to have somebody with a list of equipment and prices and stuff, and they have it like the price is set at the beginning of the season. So whatever the prices were, today, January 1st, 2024, would set like how the rest of the year would be. So like if you show up at nationals this year and you've got a new gun that came out after January 1st, well, you wouldn't be allowed in that division anymore. But if you had like a CZ Shadow 2 and the price raised, and now it's not, it's above $22,000, well, you'd still be allowed because at January 1st it was this price. But so like that could be one way of doing it. It'd just be harder to enforce. So
Right. Now, how hard would it be though, since you've done some software stuff? USPSA, they make you take that survey before nationals. What if they used that data that you put in about your gun and your equipment? How hard would it be for that to automatically calculate your division and populate that into nationals registration?
uh I mean, you'd have to have a thoroughly detailed, survey system, and then
But would you
so
need more than the gun itself and the optic?
well, would depend on how you define it, right? But if it was just gun and optic, I mean, it could be fairly easy to implement. And then you'd have to have a gear check to make sure, like, hey, did what they filled out in the survey actually correct?
Right, but
But
if you show up like, and I bring this up because someone had mentioned it with IPSC, like when you go to check in for the match, when you go to registration, you've got to prove all that information so it's done that
yeah,
day, you
yeah,
know? So
yeah.
I feel
So
like that would be the way to do it.
yeah. I mean, you could fairly easily have come up with a survey, where you got to fill out questionnaire, you got to fill out, and make it digital, and have all the prices like in a database, already ready to go. So
Yeah.
like, yeah, I mean, that wouldn't be too difficult to do, no. But it would
Okay.
require people that would, be able to program it, and then also, update continually update the equipment list every year, essentially.
Yeah, but like you said, if you did it once every year on January 1st, that first week of
Yeah,
January,
yeah,
then I feel like it's a one-time thing. It's done for the entire rest of the year. You
yeah.
don't have to worry about it.
And feasibly, if they were to do it that way, they could also have like some like drop down checklist on their website where you could check beforehand. Like, I could, say next week after they publish the new prices, you could go to their website and say, here's my gun, here's this, what's the MSRP, and then get your, hey, do you pass this year before you even go into your first match? So yeah, I mean, that could be done.
Yeah.
um yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
It doesn't seem complicated, but I don't do that stuff, so I'm not
right,
going to say it is or isn't. It
yeah.
could be more involved than I think.
I feel like the programming would be not that difficult. I think the difficult thing would be going to get accurate MSRPs for everything that could show up at a match, right? And that could get more expensive, more time consuming for a person to go and populate that data table.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think you'd have to decide that, like a CZ10, this is the price, but at what point do you start adding all the different modifications in, and
Yeah,
at what point does it break over, so
yeah,
yeah, it would just
right,
be, it
right,
could get complicated in that regard.
yeah. But hey, that is an option of way things could be done. But I think, at least for me, that concept kind of goes against like the performance based rules versus equipment specific based rules.
Right.
Like, I think the rules should revolve around a performance, right? Like, if we think, say, frame mounted optics is a competitive advantage, then you would have a performance based rule based on frame mounted optics. But if you just say, well, 2011s are better than SIGs, so we're gonna not allow 2011s in this division, I don't think that's good. I think that's a bit more arbitrary. Just like USPSA's formal rule about CZs have to be fully decocked and not half decocked is kind of based on some arbitrary person saying, well, half decocked is slightly lighter than fully decocked, so you shouldn't be allowed. But if you have a decocker model, you can put it in half cock, which is the decock position, because that's a decocker. Like, that's just dumb. Like, no, just make it performance based. Like, either DA in a
Right.
safe manner, which is half cock, or single action safety on. Like that. That should be it. Like, not some weird arbitrary. Well, somebody said this gun's better in this configuration.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, Kurt,
yeah.
that's what I had. Was there anything else that we talked about that you meant to go back and clarify, or anything you want to add?
Let me think. I don't know. So I think we've covered a lot of my data and stuff, but yeah. Well,
For sure.
also, this is my first time coming public with my personality, because so when I started this was in the kind of the height of Derek and everyone else being banned by USPSA for doing stuff on social media. So I was really paranoid about getting banned, and I know the Area 2 director, was furiously trying to find who I was when I first started posting. Whether they care about me now anymore, who knows? But I was worried about getting banned. But I've decided, especially given the current circumstances with USPSA, is I don't really care if I get banned. I'll just shoot matches locally. I know my local people, love me, especially since I actually host matches. So, uh, I don't, even if I get banned, I don't think my local people will ban me. If we switch over to other outlaw matches like PCSL or APSL or whatever it may be, we can still run those matches. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, if the board doesn't let me go to nationals, like, who cares? I know I'm not good enough to place well at nationals. I don't want to spend the money to go to nationals. I don't want to give my money to USPSA at the moment, so I don't really care that much. But I also think it'd be silly for them to ban me formally anyway. I don't think they will anyway. But
I don't think so.
it's just one of those that, like, yeah,
I mean, all the stuff you've posted is just statistical numbers that are
yeah,
factual. It's not opinion based. It's like, other than the recommended hit factors, but that's still based on numbers and that
yeah,
1%. So there's still a
yeah,
logical conclusion. So
yeah.
yeah, I don't think you've done anything.
But yeah, if anyone wants to, so my personal shooting account is McKenna _ shooting, and that's where I post my own matches. That's my personal account. I post match stuff for, like, kind of what I've been doing equipment wise, because I'm a tinkerer, but at heart too. I'm an engineer. I like playing around with stuff. So you can see I took a CZ75 pre-B surplus pistol, and did all the gunsmithing to fit a Shadow 2 slide, modern trigger, and magazines into it. And because um, like, I'm of the opinion that, like, there is a maximum weight on a gun before you start having uh, like
Right.
recoil issues and bouncing and stuff by having a too heavy of a gun. So I was playing around
Right.
playing around with the short dust cover, and what can that do for me. So I'm a tinkerer. It's fun. That's what I've been up to lately, is just little stuff
Well,
like
you're an
that.
engineer. I
Yeah,
expect it.
yeah, yeah,
That's what you guys do.
yep,
And
yep,
there's the comp. There you go.
yep. Yeah, that's the 507 comp sitting on top of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Nice.
I love that gun. It's fun to shoot. Um, and then, yeah, what else about me? I guess yeah, I'll be trying, or will be graduating with my PhD this year. So
Woohoo.
if you guys don't see much posts from me, that's probably
That's
because
why.
I need to be actually focusing on doing that, rather than the fun data stuff. Even though I know everyone wants to see the fun data stuff, but that takes time, and my
Yeah.
wife wants me to graduate. I want to graduate.
It's definitely time consuming. So,
Yeah, but
well,
yeah, I
Kurt, I
appreciate it,
appreciate
Dave.
you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm going to put I'll put your McKenna shooting plus your practical shooting analytics and the APSL in the show
Yeah,
notes. So people
awesome.
can just click on that.
Yeah, and I'll probably I need to update the posts for APSL, and I'll probably start adding some stuff over there. Like I said, things to look out
Okay.
very soon. I'll be posting some stuff on the PCSL classifiers. So
Okay. We'll definitely be
yeah,
looking forward to that then.
all right. Well, thanks, Dave.
All right. Good luck, Kurt.
Appreciate it.
Until next time.
Don't be a little bitch.
Yeah.